He had long white hair to skirt his cold, handsome face. He wore a white robe hemmed with gold, and he approached like the Son of God he was. The whole world seemed humbled by his mere presence. Everyone watched the light Son of God come on stage, and they all froze with bated breath. His oppressive presence made it difficult for the audience to look at him straight. To look at him felt like blasphemy. So handsome. A woman could not help but blurt out. He looked so holy, even a woman from a different race couldn't help but find him attractive. Compared to humanity, the light Son of God was like a perfect being. He stood casually, yet he emitted a holy aura that belittled everyone else who looked at him. The light Son of God was of a similar height to Han Sen, but from the way he stood, he looked taller. It was as if he was looking down on Dollar. His eyes were full of disdain, as if Han Sen's worth was less than that of an ant. The evolvers who watched felt suffocated. It was like a mound of rocks was slowly being built upon their chests, and they wanted to heave blood out of their mouths. God said, "Let there be light." These words exited light Son of God's mouth. His white eyes shone, as if to embody the God he spoke about. He said these words before every single fight. It wasn't anything personal uttered towards Han Sen, because he looked at everyone the same way. He considered everyone he opposed as nothing. With his angelic voice, light Son of God raised his index finger. It was thin, long, and perfectly chiseled. It pointed towards Han Sen. A white beam suddenly formed in the air and pinged off Han Sen's forehead before he had the chance to react. Han Sen looked as if he had been sniped with a perfect headshot. His body leaned backwards after the shot, and he crumbled like a castle to the ground, the momentum catching up and sliding him a good distance back. The humans who watched the fight fell silent and suddenly felt terrible. Dollar could not even withstand a ranged attack that came from light Son of God's finger. The people who had researched light Son of God bore wry smiles as they shook their heads. They knew this was going to happen, but still, they couldn't help but feel bad. The light Son of God's attacks were too fast, and humans had no chance of dodging the white beams emitted from his fingers. Suddenly, Dollar's collapsed body moved. He pulled himself back to his feet and touched his head. His dark purple helmet had a circular indentation in it. It was almost like a bullet hole, but it didn't pierce all the way through. "Corinne!" people yelled, with reinvigorated joy. They couldn't put into words their sudden relief, and all they could do was chant his name in unison. Han Sen's forehead lit up with pain. He had already cast the Ant King's energy flow to boost his defense inside his Berserk Ant King armor, and still, light Son of God's attack had almost pierced right through. His foe was stronger than he had imagined, and he most certainly believed he was a super spirit. He was most likely stronger than a super creature. Light Son of God's power was indeed at the level of a super creature, but his wisdom far exceeded theirs. When light Son of God lifted his finger earlier, Han Sen could not even see the beam's trail. Without seeing it coming, he could not react to it. Before he noticed it was firing at his forehead, it was too late. Light Son of God saw Han Sen survive his beam attack, and was surprised that Han Sen's head was not blown off. He raised his lips and mockingly said, "Not bad. To not be killed by my beam. Your life must have many accomplishments. If I can kill you, that'll just be another one to the tally." Han Sen shook his head. The beam was incredibly powerful. Although his helmet blocked it, his head still suffered a concussion. His neck was in pain as well, most likely suffering whiplash from the sudden impact. Light Son of God had a disdainful smile, and he said, "Ignorant human, that first hit was only a drop from the well of my power. Do you really think you have what it takes to compete against me? Yes, for if that was any indication, you must have a pretty small well." After that, Han Sen ran towards Light Son of God with his fist raised. But after Han Sen's first step, Light Son of God pointed his finger at him again. The white beam managed to strike Han Sen's head once more. Blood dripped from beneath his helmet. Everyone was shocked, the blood telling them that things weren't going too well. Too strong. This is not something mere evolvers can go up against. With such speed and power, there is no way he can win. A lot of people had similar thoughts, as the audience's faces went pale. Although the light Son of God was not going after them, they still felt hopeless after watching his dominating power. The dark purple body stood up once more. The helmet had another bullet hole in it, and this time it had pierced all the way through, causing blood to leak from the hit. It was a terrifying sight. Is that all you got? Han Sen stared at the light Son of God as the blood in his body pumped faster to the accompaniment of his heart. Han Sen felt no fear, only excitement. He saw the glimmer of hope, the one that would guide him to defeat the light Son of God. The light Son of God's attacks did not heavily damage him. Even though the beam pierced through his armor, the power was not enough to damage his gargoyle glyph body. He had cast the bear cub's energy flow to strengthen his body even more. Han Sen's greatest disadvantage right now was the fact he was using Dongxian Sutra to cast a number of different energy flows at once. He couldn't fight much longer, so he had to find a way to end the battle soon. He could not risk collapsing from exhaustion. He stepped forward with another look of certainty. He raised his fist again with the intent of hitting the light Son of God. The light Son of God's face looked ugly, almost as if he was mad. 5 fingers now pointed at Han Sen, and another 5 beams of light pierced through Han Sen's body. Han Sen's body was sent flying, his blood like flowers in the air. A few sensitive female spectators held their mouths as tears fell from their eyes. With more blood seeping through his wounds and the tears of his armor, Han Sen managed to stand up once again. He didn't say anything this time. He just tried to punch Light Son of God again. Light Son of God's eyes went cold as he fired another 5 beams of light. Han Sen tried to evade them, but the beams really were too quick. He could not dodge them, and again, 5 more bloody holes appeared in his armor. But this time, Han Sen did not fall. His legs carved 2 deep marks into the hard floor of the arena. Han Sen used his hands to maintain his grip and not fall over. Although things looked dire, he didn't fall. Blood continued to drip. Seeing Han Sen still managing to stand up, the chests of many people felt heavy with sunken emotions. When the light Son of God looked at Han Sen again, there was no longer disdain in his expression. Instead, he looked at Han Sen with respect. He considered the dollar he was up against to be a genuine opponent. Now, I will treat you like a real foe. You can quit now, if you'd like. If you choose not to, understand I will not allow you to live, the light Son of God offered, continuing to look at Han Sen. Han Sen did not answer. He just raised his fist to try to punch him again. The light Son of God's body finally moved. His entire body became light, and he teleported in front of Han's senator. Several beams of light were cast, which stitched together to strike Han Sen. Arg! Han Sen's body was smacked into the air as more and more blood began to pour from inside the dark purple armor like a red peony. Pang! Han Sen's body crashed down onto the ground with a heavy thud. Not a single sound came from the audience that looked on, as the light Son of God's power shocked them all. But in their hearts the faint flame of hope was yet to be fully extinguished. Stand up! People chanted this line in their hearts, but did not dare shout it out loud. They felt their hopes were pitiable, and nothing more than false hopes. They thought it was like trying to light a match in a typhoon. They hoped the match could continue to burn, but they feared if they said something, its fire would go out. Even though they did not speak, however, they still understood its futility. The wind itself was what would extinguish a match that was lit inside a typhoon. But Han Sen was not a little flame. He stood up. A few cracks delicately traced and adorned his armor, blood seeping through them. Despite his wounds, he stood up straight in defiance. He waved his fist towards the light Son of God again. The light Son of God snorted and moved. The beams of light were cast again, and they all struck Han Sen's body, which summoned even more spilt blood. Han Sen did try to dodge it, but again, his foe was too fast. He could not see the attacks, and as a result, could not evade. He was repeatedly knocked down, but he never stayed there. Every time he was knocked down, he got up again. His armor was coated with a vast number of marks. His dark purple armor was now dyed red in his blood. "Stop fighting! Give up!" a woman cried out with a soft voice. She tried to hold it in, but no longer could. With a voice that was as soft as a prayer, she pleaded. She did not want to see Dollar suffer a slow, brutal death. Han Sen could not hear her voice, and even if he had, he would not care. He looked far worse than he actually felt. If it was ordinary armor he was using, he would have been killed far sooner. Under the constant attacks, the armor would have broken a long time ago. The Devil Ant King armor had very strong recovery abilities, however. Han Sen simulated the Ant King's energy flow, which allowed it to absorb the damage that was being dealt and not wholly break. The damage he had taken earlier was healed before he suffered the latest hit. This was what allowed Han Sen to pick himself up again and again. Without the protection of the Ant King armor, he would have been shredded into nothing but bits. Han Sen, who had been beaten down again, stood up once more. He raised his fist but could never get close enough to the light Son of God to even touch the cloth of his garment. Han Sen wasn't being reckless, but the light Son of God was too fast, and he simply could not follow. If he hadn't been able to sustain the attacks, then his inability to defeat the spirit would have been assured. Han Sen needed to get a grip on the light Son of God's attack pattern. If he could just touch him, he might have what it took to beat him. Heavenly Go's formation allowed for the prediction of an enemy's attack pattern. He could react before they started attacking, and this even allowed him to dodge bullets. When the opponent started firing, it would be too late, of course. You would have to dodge just as the gun was raised. Dongxian Sutra could do this, too, but perhaps even more effectively. The light Son of God was too fast, though, and Han Sen could not even see when he chose to raise his finger guns. Therefore, Han Sen had to analyze the light Son of God's attack pattern. If this was anybody else, doing so would have been impossible. But Han Sen had the Dongxian aura. He had been using it this entire time to observe his enemy's energy flow. The energy moved before the body did, and the energy inside the light Son of God could not lie. Han Sen had to better learn his energy flow, so he could predict the spirit's movements and evade before he unleashed an attack. I'm almost there. I just need a little more time. Now, the light Son of God's energy flow was starting to appear more clearly to Han Senator soon. He would be able to predict his every movement. But the humans who were watching could only see him getting beaten down repeatedly, with seemingly no advancement. People felt their hearts slowly break as they watched the blood paint his armor. Pang! Han Sen was hit by the white beams once more. He crashed onto the ground head first, his helmet carving into the arena floor as he slid another few meters. His head had formed a trench in the ground, which shocked the people watching. This hit to Han Sen was the same as before. It wasn't deadly, but his neck was already injured, and he struggled to stand up immediately. He rolled his neck a few times first to ease the pain. But this movement, to the people who were watching, strained their suspended hopes. All they could see was Han Sen being beaten down another time, now unable to lift himself up. They thought his neck had been broken, despite his urge to continue the fight. They thought he was dying. It was as if it was only his will that kept him coming back for more. Even those who did not like Dollar were tense. Dollar, stand up. No one knew who started it, but every human present began chanting those words. It did not matter whether it was in pity or whether or not Dollar could even hear it, but they wanted to shout this out in his honor. They didn't want to believe he was dead. They wanted to see him stand up. And for as long as he stood up, they knew there was a chance of victory. Han Sen could not hear what they were saying, and he only bent his neck to make himself feel a bit better. But after that, he chose to stand up. Of course, the others thought they had given him the encouragement needed to defy a looming death and get back into the fray. With grand excitement, they now started to feel emotional. The bodies of a few vibrated in the release of tension. Even Queen, who hated Dollar to her core, now felt enthusiastic. She clenched her fists, and although she did not say it out with the rest, chanted in her heart and hoped for a happy ending. Dueler. Fong Mingquan was watching the match as well. Usually, he could talk a lot when commentating a fight, but he could not do that on this day. All he could think to say right now was to call Dollar's name. The light Son of God was powerful like an ancient deity, but his eyes suddenly revealed a glint of panic. He noticed Han Sen's body was recovering once more. Even scarier was the fact that he couldn't strike the same wound twice. Han Sen had now read the light Son of God's energy flow. Whenever his foe drew upon energy, Han Sen could calculate the exact time he'd make his next move. Dongxian Sutra was now beginning to prove its worth. Han Sen wanted to dodge the Light Son of God's attacks before they were even executed, and later lead him into the exact position he wanted him to be. By doing this, he had greatly improved prediction and formation. From the beginning up until now, that was what Han Sen had sought to achieve. But the Light Son of God was too fast, and Han Sen's attempts were lacking as a result. The crowd couldn't see any of this, but Han Sen was doing something. Subtly, he was preventing the Light Son of God from hitting him in the same place twice. Now that Han Sen was familiar with the Light Son of God's energy flow, his abilities of prediction and formation were getting better and better. The Light Son of God's body was like lightning, and he repeatedly slashed with his lethal white beams. Not one hit Han Sen, but still, each evasion was only accomplished by a scant few millimeters. The Light Son of God was flabbergasted, unable to believe Han Sen had managed to dodge his attacks repeatedly. He dodged it. Hua Ping's eyes brightened. This was the first time he had seen Han Sen dodge the Light Son of God's attacks. Tang Jinlu and the rest saw him dodge the attack, too, and were all shocked. Dollar had taken a lot of damage, and if anything, should have been in worse shape now than earlier. But now, after all the damage he had sustained, he had managed to evade an attack from the Light Son of God. Coincidence? Everyone asked themselves. The Light Son of God was unable to believe what had happened, so he started to move again and used the beam to attack Han Sen once more. Everyone who saw his next attack were unable to tell if Dollar could dodge it again. Although people believed his earlier dodge was purely a dollar-incidence, people were still praying for some sort of miracle to occur as they watched the fight. He dodged it again. Dollar dodged the Light Son of God's attack. Fang Mingquan was overwhelmed with excitement and leapt off his stool. Those who had been disappointed in how the fight had been going up until now suddenly felt the reignition of a warming fire. They were feeling hope once more. With wide-open eyes, they paid extra attention to the arena. As for the girls who shed tears earlier, their salty streams ceased. Drying their eyes, they perked up and refocused their attention.
Impossible.
The Light Son of God's face suddenly looked dour. His body glowed with a holy light, which slowly consumed his entire body. He raised all 10 fingers and pointed them at Han Senator. He hastily unleashed 10 beams as he did so. Han Sen started moving his body like a street-crawling drunkard. He looked so very unstable, but within those strange movements, Han Sen managed to dodge every single beam. And during Han Sen's wobbling, he inched his way closer and closer to the Light Son of God. This infuriated Han Sen's nemesis, as he and his holy-looking body kept casting beam after beam, trying to kill him. The crowd's eyes opened wider and wider, watching the stage. They could hardly believe what they were seeing. The Light Son of God, who had previously looked indestructible and flawless in his composure, was now unable to deal damage to Dollar. Although there were still some beams that grazed Dollar, such hits were nothing grievous enough to slow his advancement, and nowhere critical on his body was dealt damage. The beams didn't pierce his body like they did earlier, either. The chance of the Light Son of God hitting Han Sen became increasingly lower. The holy-looking Light Son of God, who could not previously lose, started to tremble. His face hungered for feral violence. His calm composure from earlier had now evaporated, and his boisterous look was nowhere to be found. Heavenly Go? Is this Heavenly Go? Kill Dollar really was Dollar himself. Heavenly Go can really be used against Light Son of God? Someone recognized the skill Han Sen was using, or so they thought. After taking a closer look, they noticed how it seemed to resemble Heavenly Go, but different in some way. It looked even better than Queen's Heavenly Go. No wonder Queen didn't stand a chance against Dollar. Dollar is good at Heavenly Go, too. He might even be better at it than Queen. I thought only Queen knew Heavenly Go. How does Dollar know it, as well? And how is his version even better? Dollar's Heavenly Go does seem strange, and it is indeed different than the real one. Everyone was talking about it, and even Queen looked at the scene weirdly. Although it did look similar, she knew he wasn't using the genuine Heavenly Go, and the difference between the two was something only she could tell with absolute certainty. Even if it wasn't Heavenly Go, what Queen saw was a skill that was better than her own signature move. The world has a better formation skill than Heavenly Go? Queen didn't want to believe this, but from what her own two eyes were telling her, she had to. If Queen was in Han Sen's shoes right now and used Heavenly Go, she wouldn't have been able to dodge the light Son of God's attacks. What Dollar was doing was unequivocally better. People were perplexed, having seen the tables flip like they had. Dollar was getting ravaged earlier, but now, the light Son of God was unable to do a thing. Although Dollar could only dodge for the time being, at least he wasn't being injured. If he could keep this up, he might have a clear chance of winning. Han Sen pushed his Dongxian Sutra to the max. He used Dongxian Aura to sense the light Son of God's energy flow, and all the while continued to evade his foe's blisteringly fast attacks. What the others saw was unbelievable. It was as if Dollar could predict what move was coming next, and always remained one step ahead. Even the light Son of God himself was shocked, unable to understand how the human before him could predict his every move. It was like the human was peering directly into his soul and understood everything he thought about. The powerful light Son of God began to harbor doubt in his heart. When he looked at Han Sen, he could no longer retain his look of supremacy. The purple-red body in front of him seemed unreachable, and it seemed as if his human foe had a thick fog or haze obscuring him from his vision. The light Son of God suddenly regretted torturing him in the beginning, and how he didn't simply blow the human away right when the battle began. No longer caring for Divinity's bout, all he wanted to do right now was kill the human that threatened him. But he couldn't. Now the real fight begins. The light Son of God was firing on all cylinders, trying to catch Han Sen with his beams, but he couldn't. No matter how fast he fired, Han Sen seemed able to predict his every move, resulting in a miss every time. Han Sen knew this was his opportunity. He knew he could keep dodging the light Son of God's attacks, and all he would have to do was touch him to claim victory. The light Son of God was ridiculously fast, and it was clear that the spirit's primary trait was indeed speed. But this came at the cost of physical toughness. If the spirit was this quick, it wouldn't have the defense of a super creature. He only wore a robe instead of armor, as well. This clue suggested that the spirit did not depend on vitality. I just need to hit him. If I do that, I'll have a chance. I am only one step away from the Son of God's reward. I have to risk it, no matter what. What if I am given a super beast soul, or even a super spirit? Han Sen gritted his teeth, dodging in a way to position the light Son of God exactly where he wanted him to be. He can actually dodge the light Son of God's attacks like that? This is amazing. But still, dodging alone cannot secure victory. His attacks are too slow. He might not be able to hit the light Son of God. Hua Ping was full of both excitement and worry. He had watched many second god sanctuary divinities bouts over the years, and Dollar was the only evolver to come this far. He really hoped Dollar could win, and thus claim the light Son of God's position. But there was still a gulf of power separating the two. Even though Dollar could utilize his magic dodging moves to avoid the light Son of God's attacks, the speed of Dollar's enemy kept them distanced from each other. He would most likely not be able to touch the light Son of God, and that was enough for the spirit to maintain his throne. Everyone knew Dollar had opened his gene lock to fight, which meant his time was limited. Ordinary evolvers, in a fight this long, would already have exhausted their strength and had their gene lock shut down. Dollar was abnormal, it would seem. His fitness was much higher than the average evolver, and it seemed as if he could last far longer with an active gene lock. But it was not infinite, and no one knew exactly when it might fail. In fact, Han Sen's ability to hold on this long was not solely down to his fitness. It was because he had Long Live and Jade Sun Force. Energy replenished constantly, giving him what he needed to hold on. But Han Sen was still bound by his evolver status, and while he could indeed last a long time, he could not last forever. He would still have to beat the light Son of God, sooner rather than later. Han Sen's eyes were so calm, and his body was so composed. Slowly, bit by bit, he was threading the subtle movements to lead the light Son of God into exactly the right position. The light Son of God, by this point, was madly attacking Han Sen like a rabid laser dog. He hadn't noticed up until now that he had been driven to the edge of the arena. The moment the light Son of God backed into a corner, Han Sen made his move. Although he wasn't as fast as the light Son of God, he was quick enough that others could not even see his body. Even the spirit himself was spooked and taken off guard by the sudden burst of speed from his opponent. He did not expect Han Sen to possess a speed like that, and he had unwittingly let him get close. Han Sen's eyes burst into flames. His heart pounded like a hammer as his bones and flesh vibrated. A white light coursed through his body to give him greater speed. He simulated the light sun of God's own energy flow. His fitness prohibited him from being as powerful as the light sun of God himself, but it was still effective. And this was a move that went beyond the audience's wildest expectations. Han Sen's fitness was 217. The fitness of a super creature was around 300. The difference between them was 30%, so there was no chance the spirit could utterly, completely dominate Han Sen. How can he be that fast? Many people stood up in reaction to Han Sen's sudden, blazingly quick attack. With a speed like that, maybe he can? Fang Mingquan's excitement was through the roof. Hua Ping clenched his fist and stared at Han Sen's next move with unblinking eyes. If this speed did not allow Han Sen to close the gap and touch the light sun of God, there wouldn't be another chance. A lot of people held their hands, in the hope that Han Sen could now hit his fearsome foe. The light sun of God was already on the corner of the battleground, and he had been spooked by Han Sen's sudden change of pace. When he realized what was going on, he quickly dodged Han Sen's attack and went right past him. He managed to slip away from the corner. The audience could not help but sigh. They felt sorry for Dollar because, after all that, the light son of God had still managed to dodge the attack that had so much build-up. His enemy was still too fast. If you want to compete with my speed, you have a long way to go, the light son of God said with a mocking smile and disdainful look as he passed Han Sen by.
Ido.
Han Sen stood where he was and coldly looked at the light son of God who had gone right past him. He opened his hands and tried to grab the light son of God. It is useless to compete with my speed. Nothing in the second God's sanctuary rivals me. You pitiful humans will never be able to achieve the same. The light son of God sped up again and created a gap between him and Han Sen once more. Han Sen's hand had not been able to even touch his clothes. Seeing Han Sen's hands trying to grab him, the light son of God simply pulled away even further. The people who were watching were starting to once again feel weak and without hope. But then suddenly, the light son of God, who was quite far from Han Sen, had his whole body sucked towards Han Sen like a magnet. He was thrown through the air towards his human nemesis upside down. When the gap closed, Han Sen grabbed his head. Let's try that again. Han Sen raised his fist and brought a punch down directly on the light son of God's suddenly distraught face. Pang! The light son of God's head suffered a terrible strike, which sent it backward. A large red mark painted the center of his pretty face, and his nose had been bent out of shape as it now oozed blood. After that heavy attack, the light son of God's body did not slip away as he intended it to. He was sucked back into Han Sen's hand. Without hesitation, Han Sen struck again, his fist unleashing the elephant disc punch upon his foe's face multiple times. Punch after punch it raged, the skull of his enemy clanging like metal. Every punch was strong, and even the bones inside rattled and collided against themselves. The light son of God was in total shock. He tried to squirm his way free, to resist and fall back, but he couldn't. Some strange force drew his body towards Han Sen, one he couldn't escape. His speed had slowed down, and in this frenetic panic Han Sen had managed to catch up. Pang! Pang! The infernal fists crashed down on the light son of God's face like a landslide. The sound of each punch was an audible pleasure. The boisterous light son of God was like anybody else now, with a bruised face and bleeding nose. The light son of God wanted to block the hits that kept pummeling him, but the force continuously sapped him of his speed. His moves were still being predicted, and Han Sen reacted accordingly every time. Han Sen punched him every time he made half a move. Being unable to dodge, all he could do was flail his hopeless hands. The spectators all froze in their seats. The light son of God was getting pummeled by Han Sen over and over, until he was black and blue from head to toe. Left punch, right punch, elbow strike, knee strike. The light son of God was like a punching bag, getting attacked without reprieve. His face was a sordid, disfigured mess. The sound of beaten flesh and rattled bones was almost sinister, and hearing it shocked all those who watched and listened. People couldn't believe the light Son of God could ever be treated so poorly and have such a wretched day. But amongst all these hits, there was one thing Han Sen could not do. He could not break the light Son of God's bones. The bodies of super spirits were too strong, and even the light Son of God, who had no prioritization of vitality, had unbreakable bones. You can't kill me, you pitiable human. You can't kill a son of God. Once your energy has depleted, I am going to make you suffer my wrath and end you. The light Son of God was seething with rage, and he gritted his teeth to spitefully curse his opponent aloud. He had been drawn to Han Sen by a strange force. Despite all he tried, he could not break away and create distance between himself and Han Senator. All he could do was suffer the repeated blows. The punches he had received were innumerable, and his pretty face was now a maimed wreck. His heart only wanted one thing right then, and that was to kill Han Sen. But he was stripped of all strength, and he could not use his hands to utilize his great speed and power as he did before. In such close-quarter combat, he was unable to compete with Han Sen. But the light Son of God was aware that humans did not possess an infinite amount of energy, and using such exhaustive powers to restrain and pummel him was sure to be taxing for the caster. Once Han Sen's energy had depleted, he would fight back and destroy his assaulter. Han Sen did not care what hostile words the light Son of God spoke, and he just continued casting his elephant disc punch all across the spirit's body. His head, especially. I am going to kill you. I am going to kill you, the light Son of God screamed in a frenzy. He wished he could tear Han Sen apart, as his face had devolved into a hideous hodgepodge of bruises and blood. I'm not sure you'll get the chance to, Han Sen replied coldly. Han Sen pushed the energy in his right arm to the max, and elephants trumpeted and stampeded all about his body. A primitive, beastly power now energized his fist. It was like God himself was going to smite his enemy with all his might. Boom! That horrible fist rocketed into the light Son of God's face, shattering his skull. Blood and brain matter sprayed everywhere while the rotten, headless corpse was still propped up by Han Sen's other hand. When Han Sen first began punching the light Son of God's head, he used force and elephant disc punch. To finish his foe off, he used elephant wreck strike. It detonated the force that had built up inside his enemy's head, causing it to explode from the inside. Outside the battlefield was all quiet. It was like the audience had turned to stone upon seeing the headless corpse in front of Han Senator. They could not believe Han Sen had overcome the odds and beaten the light Son of God. The body of the light Son of God began to disintegrate into sparkles as he was returned to his spirit stone. Han Sen exited the divinity's bout battleground and returned to the Crystal Palace. Han Sen collapsed and hit the floor. He had exhausted far too much power over the course of that fight. Jade Sun Force and Long Live could sustain him for a long time, but when he drew too much power at once, it took a long while for it to recover. He didn't only use Elephant Rex Strike this time. He simulated the energy flows of multiple creatures. With such a large energy output, in addition to the damage he had already sustained, it was a miracle that he lasted as long as he did. If it wasn't for the reward of becoming one of the 10 Son of Gods, Han Sen would not have held on as long as he did. Fortunately, even though the light Son of God's speed was frightening, his body was not as tough as a super creature's. This was what allowed Han Sen to finish him off in the way he did. But beating the light Son of God was largely because of his usage of the gourd's energy flow. He initially thought the energy flow was useless, but the opposite turned out to be true. He never expected the suction of the gourd's energy could draw the light Son of God towards him. Although it didn't totally restrain his body, it lowered the light Son of God's speed enough for Han Sen to keep up. If it wasn't for this, Han Sen would most likely not have been able to defeat him. I don't ever want to struggle through a fight like that again. Han Sen continued to lie on the floor as his entire body rocked with pain. He couldn't even muster the strength to move his fingers. Zero approached, holding the silver fox in her arms. Zero tried to heal the wounds he had sustained, while the silver fox used its tongue to lick the greater traumas he had incurred.
Kvietly, Han Sen recovered.
The Alliance, on the other hand, was busy. Dollar had just beaten the light son of God and earned a position amongst the 10 son of gods. This made him the first human son of God in recorded history. For humanity to be able to achieve something as big as this, it was no small topic. People were going crazy. All the news organizations reported Dollar's victory over the light son of God and his earning a position as a son of God. Each and everyone gushed praise over his heroism. The night after, Dollar's name became synonymous with the word hero. The fight between Dollar and the light son of God was on the tip of everyone's tongue. Dollar is too strong. He is the first son of God in the second God's sanctuary. I still can't believe he did it. Dollar actually beat the light son of God. It was brutal. He blew the light son of God's head off. There are no other gods following Dollar. To assert a position as a son of God is a staggering achievement, and the first God's sanctuary's divinity's bout does not offer half the challenge. This Dollar isn't too bad. After all these years, it has been nice to have ourselves a son of God. It's not easy. Ordinary people were more than pleased over Dollar's simple victory, whereas those in the Alliance were dying to find out where he might be. His performance was terrifying, especially the manner in which he killed the light son of God. Without a doubt, Dollar had managed to absorb a life geno-essence. All they would have to do to learn his secrets was track him down. But their investigations all led to dead ends, and they were unable to find the elusive figure. Han Sen's doppelganger remained in the goddess shelter while he rested and recovered in the Crystal Palace, waiting for divinity's bout to end. He decided to never join another divinity's bout. With his current level of power, fighting super spirits was still a difficult and dangerous affair. Beating the light son of God was solely because of his usage of the gourd's energy flow, and if he had not done that, he could never have managed to beat him. If he had gone up against a super spirit that focused on vitality instead, he would never have managed to break through its defense. The first 10 rewards were randomized. He didn't need to fight and achieve a higher place for the chance of earning an even better reward. Gunning for first place would be impossible, as things were right now, anyway. Dollar was a household name and super famous across the entire Alliance now. Although the fights could not be recorded, someone animated a recreation of the battle. It was only 3 minutes long, but it became the most watched video for a whole week. A lot of people were inspired by the battle to create video games of it, too. Dollar did not show up for the final few fights, which established the Son of God rankings. People expected as much, so they weren't too disappointed. After all, everyone had seen how injured he was following his previous fight. In such a state, he couldn't continue fighting and had already achieved 10th place. That was enough for him. History seemed to repeat itself. Back in the first God's sanctuary, Dollar had managed to beat down his final enemy and reach 10th place in the Son of God rankings. He didn't continue after that and was happy to sit where he was. But compared to the first God's sanctuary, this 10th place earning was far harder fought and worthy of far greater praise and recognition, and rightfully so. The name Dollar would go down in the history books for being the first person to ever become a son of God in the second God's sanctuary. Han Sen continued to rest in the Crystal Palace and, as a result, missed out on the enthusiasm everyone shared for Dollar. He could see the rest of the Son of God rankings from the Crystal Palace, and the other 9 were all spirits, as expected. Each of those were stronger than the light Son of God, too. Right then, Han Sen was feeling lucky he had gone up against who he had. If it had been another spirit, he feared his chances of victory would have been even lower. Han Sen waited until Divinity's bout ended, so he could collect his reward. He could claim it from the Crystal Palace's arena, so he didn't have to worry about others seeing this. You have obtained title of 10th Son of God. Your randomized reward is opening. Han Sen placed his hand on the tablet, which caused it to shine. A lot of different images spun around in front of him. There were beasts, animals, handsome men, and pretty girls. Han Sen started to get excited. Amongst the images, Han Sen also caught sight of many different spirits. He could not guess what level they were, however. Not long after, the tablet stopped spinning. It stopped on the image of a beast. Han Sen was a little disappointed at first, as he was hoping to receive a super spirit. He wasn't sure when he'd achieve the power needed to earn a super spirit for himself. After all, Fighting an entire shelter's worth of foes was different than going one-on-one and toe-to-toe with a soul super spirit. Such shelters were also bound to include a number of super creatures as well. You have obtained a super beast soul, devil unicorn. The voice made Han Sen feel happy again. Although he did not receive a super spirit, receiving a super beast soul wasn't too bad. A pitch-black beast suddenly appeared in front of him, and it resembled a unicorn, minus its grace. It turned into a black light and entered Han Sen's Sea of Soul. Super Beast Soul, Devil Unicorn, Possession Beast Soul. A Possession Beast Soul could directly increase the power of a human or another beast soul. Han Sen wondered what this beast soul might be able to possess. Han Sen summoned the Devil Unicorn and watched a black smoke rush inside his body. It was a beast soul that could possess a human body. When the beast soul entered Han Sen's body, his body began to produce a dark smoke that resembled a black flame. Han Sen looked like a devil that had just walked out from the pits of hell. Han Sen clenched his fists, but noticed that his power and speed had not increased. It made him curious what benefit the black smoke was providing. He found a rock and punched it. The rock broke, but he did not feel as if the black smoke helped. Amidst Han Sen's confusion, the silver fox suddenly unleashed a silver lightning bolt at his master to shock him. But strangely, the lightning did not touch Han's senator. It evaporated as soon as it came into contact with the black smoke, dissipating some of the smoke as it disappeared. Soon after, the black smoke that had disappeared returned. It seemed like the powerful lightning bolt could not deal lasting damage. Han Sen was overjoyed with this, and he thought to himself, the Devil Unicorn can actually block and absorb elemental power. In other words, it's an elemental shield. But elemental only. It most likely cannot absorb physical damage. Although it could only block elemental damage, it was enough to delight Han's senator. After all, he had what it took to dodge physical attacks. If he met an elemental super creature like the blue seahorse that could spew blue flames, he could rely on this super beast soul to see him through. I wonder what the damage threshold of the black smoke is? If it's powerful enough, then maybe I can indeed go up against the blue seahorse. Han Sen called out to the silver fox, telling him to unleash as much lightning as he could. He wanted to stress test the limits of his elemental defense. Han Sen was overjoyed with the results, and he was pleasantly surprised by the black smoke's sturdy defense properties. The silver fox's strongest attacks could not penetrate his shield anymore. If there was one issue, however, the speed of recovery. When the silver fox unleashed lightning, it would evaporate some of the black smoke. If it attacked repeatedly, the black smoke would be used up at a quicker rate than it could regenerate. This opened up a hole in his defense. Han Sen guessed that the black smoke could block an adult super creature's elemental attack, but only about 2 or 3 times at the most. After that, it would take a while for his defense to return. If it was an AoE attack, and the attack was not focused on him entirely, the black smoke would manage to hold on for longer. Its regeneration would most likely be able to catch back up, too. This is some pretty good stuff. It'll be useful for the times I must go up against an elemental super creature. Han Sen happily returned the Devil Unicorn to the Sea of Soul and fed it a black crystal. When it evolved into a Berserk Super Beast Soul, its elemental defense was sure to be stronger. Han Sen quietly snuck back into the goddess shelter and put away his beetle knight. Han Sen thought to himself, now, where can I find and slay a second-generation super creature so that I can fill up my super geno points? Becoming a surpasser meant he'd become a champion, and he'd have little reason to worry about the events of the Alliance. Aside from celestial beings, it'd be impossible for him to be threatened as well. Because of this, Han Sen wanted to become a surpasser as soon as he could. He needed to be stronger so he could not only protect himself, but his family also. Han Sen was wondering whether or not he should resume his super creature hunt on Devil's Mountain. But while he was in thought, young Monli approached to tell him that someone wanted to see him. Didn't I tell you I don't want to see anyone these days?
Han Sen frov ned.
I wasn't sure if Captain Qin counted as anyone. Therefore, I have come to double-check with you, young Monli said, looking at Han Sen. Qin Xian is here? What are you waiting for? Send her in. Han Sen was happy to hear of her arrival. There are others accompanying her, however. and they are not from our special squad. I am afraid you will have to meet with them as well, young Monley explained. Who are they? When Han Sen saw young Monley's face, he knew they must be important figures. I don't know who they are, but Captain Qin treats them with much respect and politeness. There is also a young man amongst them, who acts as if he has a crush on the aforementioned captain, young Monley said with a smile. Han Sen went to the meeting room post-haste and saw Qin Xian engaged in conversation with a few others. The group was a mixture of men and women, and there were 8 in total. 3 of the women were quite elderly, and they looked as if they were in their 80s. Of course, they only appeared as if they were in their 30s because they were evolvers. Han Sen scanned each of their energy flows to decipher their true age. There were 5 men, who varied more in age. There was 1 old man, 3 middle-aged men, and 1 other young man. The young man stood closest to Qin Xian, and he was talking with her. Between them was a white-haired old man, who looked really intimidating. It seemed as if he possessed a lot of power. He examined Han Sen, acting as if he was far superior to him. It wasn't just the old man acting like that, but the rest seemed to, as well. Their bones stiffened with a snobbish pride, and they behaved as if they were far above everyone else. Han Sen, allow me to introduce you. This is Angel Gene's director, Mr. Zhao. Qin Xian saw Han Sen approach and immediately introduced those in her company. When Han Sen heard her mention Angel Gene, he quickly understood why the people with her had such proud looks. The Alliance had 2 organizations that excelled in the field of gene research. One was Dong Lin, and the other was the Zhao family, called Angel Gene. Over 80% of the exclusive geno-solutions for hypergeno-arts in the Saint Hall were developed in association with Angel Gene. Aside from that, Angel Gene produced many products for the benefit of human genes. These products ranged from nutrient fluids to such things as hardware and technology, all for the cultivation of one's genes. Angel Gene had an excellent product line, and this allowed them to maintain a large portion of the market share. The Zhao family described themselves as being a core component for the functioning of the Alliance. While such self-serving consideration painted them as a loyal bunch, it was a means of letting everyone know that the Alliance wouldn't be what it was without them. Han Sen had heard a lot about the Zhao family's pride, as a lot of their family members were councilmen. The Zhao family's influence was so great, they had even been known to affect the entire swing of presidential elections. This alone was an example of how powerful and influential their family was considered. As a result, they had every right to be cocky. Zhaohong was one of the directors and played a pivotal role in the family. The young man amongst the people that had come to visit was called Zhao Haiyang. He was the chairman of Angel Gene and grandson of the organization's leader. Monley, come and pour tea for the Zhao director and Mr. Zhao. Han Sen believed the reason they had come to see him was because of his little angel. If that was the case, however, he wasn't sure why they had brought Qin Xian with them. Of course, their association was not a strange one. The Zhao family had ties to a great number of different factions and organizations. It was not a total surprise, seeing them together. You are Han Sen of the Ji family, yes? Zhao Heng asked. As he looked at Han's senator, it was like an elderly asking any young person a question.
Han Sen, Han Sen ansvarig.
Zhao Heng had believed him to be a true member of the Ji family, and he wasn't sure what to say in response. Not long ago, I had a chat with Ji Ruajin. The topic of you came up, and from what I hear, you are quite nice, Zhao Heng said. Thank you for the compliment. Han Sen frowned, unsure what this old man was looking to sell. Although Ji Ruajin was younger than Zhao Heng, he had already achieved more than the old man had, and he was on the verge of becoming president. Zhao Heng was only one of the dozen directors of his family. The way he spoke would suggest he was superior to Ji Ruajin himself. His voice oozed arrogance. The leader of the Zhao family would undoubtedly possess the same tone of voice. People always said the Zhao family had chutzpah, and it's true. It looks as if their heads are in the clouds, and they hardly pay heed to anyone around them, Han Sen thought to himself. Qin Xian noticed Han Sen's apparent displeasure at the company he had suddenly received, and quickly sought to remedy the situation. She said, the reason they have come here today is to request that you hunt a super creature on their behalf. Or at least, it is a beast that looks like a super creature. But before Qin Xian could continue speaking, Zhao Haiying took over and said, you don't have to come. You can just sell us your super pet. There will be no difference. When Han Sen heard this, he did not look mad. He just thought it was strange that a person like Zhao Haiyang could have survived this long in this world. Sorry, I'm not selling my super pet. And I've been quite busy recently, so my schedule is full up for the foreseeable future. Han Sen never considered helping others hunt super creatures, particularly people like the Zhao family. Young man, please consider our request. Zhao Heng blurted out at the sight of Zhao Haiyang, who looked ready to blow his lid after the sudden rejection. Han Sen wanted to say something dismissive again, but Qin Xian suddenly coughed and said, Director Zhao, please have a drink of tea. Han Sen, there is a classified document from the squad you should have a look at. I brought it over for you. Han Sen, in the exclusive company of Qin Xian, exited the room and moved to his office. Team Qin, what's going on? Has the squad ordered me to help them? Qin Xian had a wry smile, but she shook her head and said, No. If this was a matter concerning the squad, things would be simpler.
After Qin Xuan explained, Han Sen understood.
The Zhao family had many seats in the council, and Ji Ruozhen's election was running so smoothly because of the backing of the Zhao family. No wonder that Zhao Heng randomly mentioned Ji Ruozhen. That's why, huh? Han Sen coldly laughed, and then continued to say, I don't believe the Zhao family will stop supporting Ji Ruozhen due to my rejection. That Zhao Heng and Zhao Haiyang are only bluffing with their projection of power. The Zhao family's support for Ji Ruozhen provides them with benefits, too. You're right that they won't so simply give up supporting him. Qin Xian had a brief pause, but then continued by saying, But think about it. If you reject Zhao Heng, and the Zhao family complains to Ji Ruozhen, is that something you can accept? They can make Ji Ruozhen order me to help them? Han Sen asked, with a look of confusion. The presidential election is in its final stages. The Ji family will not allow any disgraceful events or controversy to tarnish their name. The reason the Zhao family has asked for your help now is because they know the Ji family will not be willing to reject them. If the Zhao family looked for Ji Ruozhen, I am afraid he will have to agree to their requests. Sometimes, even the Ji family have to concede to the plights of others, Qin Xian said. That means I have no choice. Han Sen owned 5% of shares in Sky Technology. If something went bad during the election and Ji Ruozhen was not made president, the stocks were sure to plummet. If Ji Ruozhen really was to become Han Sen's father-in-law, it seemed he would have no choice but to agree. You can still talk about the terms and conditions with the Zhao family. It's either talking about them with that lot, or with Ji Ruozhen. Who would you rather have such a talk with? Qin Xian smiled. Well, if things are like that, I'll go and help them, Han Sen said, with an evil smile. In an ancient forest resided a gentle spring and basin. It did not flow with water, nay, it flowed with blood. A creature guarded this spring, and had done so since it was born. The Zhao family believed this beast to be a super creature. They had done battle with it many times, and on each occasion, their forces were dealt grievous harm and forced to retreat. Fortunately for those that fought it, the super creature never left the spring it guarded. It never gave chase, and this allowed the Zhao family to continue provoking the beast and attempting the same fight many times. Han Sen and Zhao Heng hammered a deal out, and then Han Sen followed him out to the spring. Qin Xian accompanied them, too. This pleased Han Sen because he had no fondness for the Zhao family, and he feared he'd die of boredom without someone he was fond of talking to being present on the journey. On the way, any creatures that sought to bar or prohibit their passage were dealt with by members of the Zhao family. The 8 Zhao family members wanted to impress Qin Xian and Han Sen, as they had each unlocked a gene lock. Zhao Haiyang was quite powerful, and he was more than keen to flex his muscles. There was one thing that interested Han Sen a lot, and that was the fact that the Zhao family members' fitness levels were higher than those of most people who had unlocked their gene lock. While they were taking a break, Qin Xian quietly told Han Sen that the Zhao family had a geno optimization solution, and that the family members were provided with a special training regime since they were born. With a controlled diet, their genes would actually improve. This was why the Zhao family had greater strength than those who were at a similar level. And that was also one of the many reasons they were pompous braggarts. Qin Xian, try this. It is a nutrient fluid from angel gene, and it is good for your body. These things cannot be bought at the markets, you know? Zhao Haiyang approached the two and handed over a pin-sized bottle to Qin Xian. Inside, A transparent purple concoction swirled. Thanks, but I have my own. Qin Xian did not accept the fluid from his hand, and a hurt look crossed his face. Han Sen was laughing on the inside. The Zhao family members really seemed to think themselves as gods, as if they could do whatever they pleased. The special squad had an important rule, however. Unless the situation was dire and the absolute need arose, squad members were not allowed to accept items from others. This also applied to the people on their team. You drew from your own supply strictly to avoid problems arising further down the line. Qin Xian's rejection of the fluid was normal protocol, and even Han Sen would not even think to offer her an item. He was positive Zhao Haiying knew about this rule, but, perhaps unexpectedly, he sought to bend the rules and offer her the gift regardless. After the rejection, he sulked, and it looked as if his overbearing ego had been dealt a hearty blow. But quickly, Zhao Haiying returned to normal. He sat down next to Qin Xian and resumed talking with her. Han Sen listened in on them for a bit, and he felt sorry for her. Zhao Haiying was so self-obsessed that he could only talk about himself and about the power his family possessed. All Qin Xian did was smile and nod, without making a single vocal contribution. It wasn't long before Han Sen got tired of listening to the inane blabber and decided to sit next to a tree away from the others. There, he rested his eyes for a bit. He also sent a message to Princess Yin-yang, who was far away right then. On a mountain, a good distance from them, Princess Yin-yang was leading another party. Zero and the Silver Fox were trailing directly behind her, with Wang Yuhang at the back. He appeared to be sulking. "Hey, Princess, might I ask where we are headed?" Wang Yuhang asked miserably. "Just follow in silence. How can you incessantly drone on about so much dragon poop?" Princess Yin-yang sternly responded, giving Wang Yuhang a peeved look. The entire time the party had been traveling, Wang Yuhang had done nothing but complain. "Well, pray tell that which the boss man has pleaded we do. Communicate with me here." Wang Yuhang ran in front of Princess Yin-yang and asked with a wide smile. He had previously tried to ask Zero, but he felt as if his presence before her was invisible. She didn't respond or even look at him, as if he was nothing but an annoyance. Only Princess Yin-yang would occasionally tell him something, but nothing she said was particularly explanatory or revealing. Princess Yin-yang ignored Wang Yuhang and continued walking. Han Sen's intent for bringing Wang Yuhang and the rest was by no means good. The Zhao family had pretty much forced Han Sen into fighting a super creature, and he was not going to bow to their desires quite so simply. The Zhao family would never expect Wang Yuhang and the rest of Han Sen's team to be following them. The road was long and taxing, and getting attacked by other creatures was a common occurrence. The noise of such fights would not make for a stealthy tale, but the Silver Fox had the ability to repel creatures. So, fortunately, they could follow the larger group ahead without stirring any trouble. The Zhao family had no idea if they were coming. This ancient forest was the abode of a host of dangerous creatures, and they had killed a lot on their way in. There was a fair share of sacred blood class creatures, too. Han Sen and Qin Xian were never given the opportunity to fight, and as a result, could not reap a single benefit or reward. Zhao Haiying offered to share some meat with them, an offer they both rejected. Near an ancient tree, a river ran by that was blood-red. It was like the gentle gush of a freshly opened wound. Follow this stream of blood and ascend. In about 20 miles, we will see the blood spring and its creature, Zhao Haiying reminded them. The Zhao family were arrogant, yes, but they weren't dumb. They were borrowing Han Sen's strength to finally slay this super creature of theirs, once and for all. If they couldn't capitalize on his presence amongst them this time, they weren't sure they'd get another chance. After walking 20 miles, the ancient forest opened around a red, craggy hill. It wasn't tall, but there was a crack in the middle. The crack birthed the blood-red spring, which flowed to create a pool of blood at the bottom of the hill. In the blood pool, a black beast rested. It had black fur, and its head was crowned with 2 curved horns. It was impossible to tell what it was. Its shape seemed to resemble a dog, but it looked a little like a cat as well. Its size was equivalent to an adult tiger, and therefore quite small compared to most other super creatures. But after reading its life force, Han Sen could tell with 100% certainty that this was indeed a super creature. According to our deal, You will need to cooperate with us for the length of the fight. And also, you must provide us with the final hit, Zhao Hong told Han Sen. Okay, whatever you say.
Han Sen nodded.
Summon your super pet to fight, and we will look for an opportunity to surround it, Zhao Hong said. No problemo. Han Sen did not say much and simply summoned his Adorade. Zhao Hong and the rest looked at the Adorade with genuine admiration. There was also a glint of envy towards Han's senator. It confused them why a person such as he had been fortunate enough to find a dying super creature he could easily finish off, and then be rewarded with such a pet. Han Sen commanded the Adorade to attack the super creature, while he also sent a message to Princess Inyang. The Zhao family spread out and encompassed the area, but little else. Clearly, they were waiting for the Adorade to beat the super creature into a near-death state, so they could swoop in and claim an easy kill. These assholes, Han Sen swore in his heart. He looked at the super creature, then opened his gene lock and scanned its life force. The super creature's energy was all clouded. He could tell that it was a strong creature, but still, the cloudiness indicated it was a first-generation super creature, and therefore nothing he was particularly interested in going up against. Although the Adorade might have been a little stronger than the super creature, the power gap wasn't enough for it to dominate. The super creature was of similar strength to the Adorade, and like the Adorade, it didn't excel in any particular department. That also meant it wasn't weak in any other department either, so it was a well-balanced monster. The Adorade went ahead to slash the monster. Even though no particularly deep wounds were wrought, the attacks were enough to surprise and impress Zhao Hong. In the past, they had tried to lay siege on the monster themselves, but every attempt was a failure, and they could never seem to deal any damage to the beast. Now here they were, watching a pet go up against a super creature, dealing lasting wounds with a great sword. The sight led Zhao Hong and the rest of the Zhao family members present to view the Adorade with great admiration. But Han Sen's vision was drawn to the blood spring instead. The super creature they were fighting was quite strange. He was sure that the super creature was intelligent enough to know it was fighting a losing battle, and that it should be running away rather than staying to fight. But the super creature was determined to remain, and nothing could compel it to flee. There was something strange about this place, and the blood spring, in particular. Han Sen used Dongxian aura to take a look at the blood spring, and he was surprised to see that it abounded with energy. What was coming out was no ordinary spring water, that was for sure. The center of the spring contained life, even. As he watched the crack in the rock, Han Sen suddenly felt the presence of an extremely strong life force. The power he sensed suddenly sent him into a cold sweat. Damn it! Inside that crack, a scary creature resides. Han Sen continued to look at the crack on the craggy hill, and suddenly, he felt as if he was being watched. Like the peering of an evil eye, a malevolent gaze had fixated on him. It made his heart race with uncertain panic. Quickly, he deactivated his Dongxian aura and averted his eyes away from the spring. The creature inside the crack can find my Dongxian aura. It can even find out where I am through it. Whatever is in there is something ancient and something evil. The Zhao family have no idea what they are doing, coming here to disturb this place. For all I know, they are openly seeking suicide. Han Sen was frightened, and has continued to chill. Han Sen did not even see what the creature may have been, yet it terrified him even so. And the creature, whatever it may have been, did little else other than look back at him. Whatever the case may be, there was a super creature inside the source of the spring that was more powerful than anything he had ever encountered before. Han Sen was considering whether or not he should grab his little angel and depart. They wouldn't receive any benefits from slaying this super creature, and all the while, he feared the unknown malice was continuing to peep on him. But if Han Sen returned now and didn't finish the job, it would be a waste of time. Han Sen gave another look in the direction of the crack, then turned his head back to watch the super creature engaged with the little angel, then gave up his idea of fleeing. The creature inside the crack did not seem as if it wanted to leave its current abode, and after Han Sen gave it some more thought, he came to the conclusion that he didn't have to escape just yet. If something were to happen, he could escape more quickly than anyone from the Zhao family, anyway. So, if the creature was hungry, Zhao Hong and his people would be the first to fill up its tummy. Therefore, There was no need for Han Sen to rush and escape just yet. When the time came, he could simply return his Adorade and get moving. Team Qin, no matter what happens, stay behind me. Do not run off. Han Sen approached Qin Xian and spoke to her in a lowered voice. Why? What is it? Qin Xian looked at Han Sen with sudden surprise. The creature was already being suppressed by Han Sen's pet, so it was weird for him to suddenly say something like this to her. I feel as if something is amiss. Whatever it is, it disturbs me. It's an instinct, and my instincts are rarely incorrect. Whatever happens, do not leave my side. Stay near me. If something does indeed go wrong, we have to escape first, Han Sen told her. Okay. Qin Xian looked around and did not notice the presence of anything out of the ordinary, but still, she agreed. The little angel's greatsword continued carving marks into the super creature. Despite blood now having dyed its entire coat, it refused to escape the area. It roared to the sky and adamantly remained to fight with the little angel. Zhao Hong, with great excitement, said, Han Sen, tell your pet to put more effort in. Make her deal heavier damage to the super creature and prevent it from escaping if it chooses to. Director Zhao, this is a super creature. This isn't a scuffle between a cat and a dog, Han Sen replied coldly. Zhao Hong didn't say anything in return, acknowledging that this wasn't really something that could be rushed. And fortunately, the super creature continued to not show signs of wanting to escape. Zhao Hong then commanded his people, who were still surrounding their foe, to move a little closer. If it did want to escape, they could do their part in prohibiting its flight. But the super creature was almost behaving stupidly in its stubbornness to remain. Its inability to fight back against the little angel was plain to see, yet it continued to do what it could as the gashes and wounds mounted and caused it tremendous pain. It was bleeding heavily now, and its attacks slowed. Death would greet it soon. The little angel was like something holy. It flapped its wings, flew behind the super creature, and slashed the greatly injured neck of the super creature. A deep cleft had now been made in its neck, and the spine looked as if it was ready to snap. More and more blood seeped to the surface and bled to the ground. The super creature was knocked down to the floor. It writhed and squirmed for a while but did not get up. Han Sen, do not forget your promise. Command your pet to return and we will finish it off, Zhao Hong shouted to Han Sen, as he commanded his people to draw even closer. My job is done here, yes? You can finish it off? Han Sen did not say anything in complaint and simply returned his little angel. He could feel the creature inside the spring begin to move, and a scary aura seeped through with the water. The hill now looked frightening, and he suspected the dark menace within was about to escape its subterranean home. The super creature had not yet died, and even if it was killed by the little angel, Han Sen was not willing to walk up and claim the rewards. All he wanted to do was run away as far as he could and end all involvement with these events and this place. The 8 Zhao family members now ran close to the fallen beast and attempted to kill the super creature. They used all the different weapons they had at their disposal, striking the exposed wounds of the dying creature. But then a sudden scream sounded. The dying creature stood up again and leapt onto a man of the Zhao family. It tore the man's head off with its teeth, and its claws tore the rest into shreds. Zhao Hong shouted and used his lance to thrust at the most grievous of the wounds, on the back of the super creature's neck. The creature roared in pain and fell back down to the ground. The rest of the family ran up again and tried to strike the beast simultaneously. Although someone had died, they did not want the little angel to help out anymore, as they were afraid the little angel would finish it off with ease. Although the super creature was on the precipice of death, it had managed to lash out enough to deal damage to numerous members of the Zhao family. But now, the damage it had incurred was too great, and it would soon fall for the last time. Zhao Hong was incredibly excited. He commanded his people to attack the super creature by saying, "Come on, it's going to die soon." Out of the 8 family members, 3 had been killed. The rest had incurred at least one trauma or injury, but the thought of felling a super creature rallied their courage to continue their fight. "Let me kill it." Zhao Haiying peered at the monster that could hardly stand and spoke aloud with great excitement. Okay. Zhao Hong wouldn't disagree. Out of the 8 who had come, Zhao Hong was the eldest, and Zhao Haiyang was a direct descendant of his. But before Zhao Haiyang delivered his attack, the super creature that looked grievously injured was rejuvenated. It pounced on another family member and took off running into the forest. Zhao Hong and Zhao Haiyang looked shocked. They did not expect the super creature to run away, now of all times. Earlier, the super creature, despite being at an obvious disadvantage, did not run. Now, it was dying and could barely stand. Where had the vigor come from? Go, chase it. Do not allow it to escape. Zhao Hong reacted first, immediately commanding the others to take off after it. But suddenly, they heard the sound of rock breaking. This was a surprise to all of them. They turned around to take a look, and the little hill that was the source of the blood spring exploded outwards. The spring was no longer a crack in the earth, as a giant red centipede writhed out amidst a cloud of dust and spewed rubble. A dark red body that was thicker than the carriage of a train loomed out. A single segment of the centipede was 20 meters long, and its legs wriggled ceaselessly, carrying it towards the fighters. A second later, 2 of the remaining Zhao family were spiked to death under the centipede's wretched legs. The rest of them were almost frightened to death, and their thought of pursuing the escaped super creature quickly evaporated. Running away themselves, they shouted, "Han Sen, use your pet to restrain it. Are you kidding me? You want me to send my pet to its demise against a monster such as that?" Han Sen called back, as he and Qin Xian had already turned to leave. "Han Sen, do not forget the deal we made," Zhao Haiyang reminded him. "Our deal consisted of me helping you slay the other super creature. I have done my part. This wasn't a part of it, so it is no concern of mine." Han Sen was far ahead of the others, yelling back as he ran alongside Qin Xian. Zhao Haiyang was furious. The blood centipede was a Goliath, and it terrified them all. This was surely a foe no human could hope to compete with. A second later, the creature's mandibles grabbed another Zhao family member and sloppily devoured him. There were only 3 people of the Zhao family left now, but the blood centipede did not continue to pursue them. Instead, it took off in the direction the other super creature had gone. When Han Sen saw it, his heart jumped. The super creature had been attracted away by Wang Yuhang, but now the blood centipede had, as well. Things were taking a turn for the worse. How can Wang Yuhang be so unlucky? There is always some misfortune waiting to befall him. Han Sen was planning to go after Wang Yuhang, but then stopped and went towards the blood spring instead. "What are you doing?" Qin Xian asked, from behind. "I'm just going to take a look. You get away first," Han Sen said, as he ran back. When Zhao Hong saw Han Sen run back, he was amazed, but they didn't dare follow. They watched Han Sen run back all the way to the blood spring, unable to comprehend what his intention might have been. But to them, right then, they thought it better if Han Sen were to get himself killed. The Zhao family had sacrificed many people this day, all to no avail. The creature they sought to kill had gotten away, and all they had incurred were great losses as a result. Han Sen did not care what the Zhao family thought of him. He reached the broken rocks of the spring and jumped beyond. Earlier, when he turned on the Dongxian Sutra, he had detected the presence of a life force inside it. He already knew there was something in there. And now, while the blood centipede was away, he thought it would be okay to take a proper look at whatever lay inside. Beyond the broken stones was a tunnel that led into a cave. Inside the cave rested a blood-red egg. It was like a football, but it was completely red. The strong life force Han Sen had detected came from the egg. Han Sen was overjoyed at the discovery. He had eaten the devil ant king egg not too long ago, so he knew that this had to be some good stuff, too. There was no life geno essence inside, and it could be eaten to immediately receive super geno points. Its consumption was a much easier process than absorbing a life geno essence. Han Sen had not expected the centipede to create an egg, but regardless, he leapt over and quickly pocketed it before turning around to exit. Han Sen was still wondering how he might hope to save Wang Yuhang when suddenly he heard a sharp, monstrous, shrieking sound emitted from the forest. In the distance, he noticed many of the ancient forest's trees getting toppled in a wave that moved towards Han Sen, and he figured that the blood centipede had sensed its baby being stolen. Han Sen did not linger and quickly ran in the direction Zhao Hong had been running. He was much faster than Zhao Haiyang, and quickly managed to catch up with him. Zhao Haiyang looked back with surprise. Han Sen was directly behind him, but behind him, the giant centipede also came. The giant, slithering body was uprooting trees and spoiling the earth as it rampaged towards them. It was like a crazed dragon. "What have you done? Why did you bring it back this way?" Zhao Heng inquired, in evident anger. "Me? Oh, I didn't do anything," Han Sen said, as he continued running forward and leaving them behind. Zhao Heng cursed Han Sen, praying the worst death would strike him and strike him soon. Han Sen had attracted the monster their way, but he was now leaving them behind like bait. They wished they could kill Han Sen. Han Sen was far ahead of them now, due to his speed. The blood centipede, however, looked likely to catch up with the Zhao family members. Han Sen caught up with Qin Xian, who was still firmly ahead, leading the escape. When he turned to look back, he noticed another person of the Zhao family had fallen victim to the vile creature that chased them. "Let's go." Han Sen grabbed onto Qin Xian's waist, summoned his wings, and flew to the sky. But then he heard the blood centipede roar. It was 100 meters long when looking down, and Han Sen watched it spread transparent blood wings. It took off into the skies towards them. Bollocks! Han Sen thought he could fly away with relative ease. He didn't expect the monstrous foe to possess wings of its own, and it flew with such great haste. It was much faster than the berserk's sacred wings. "You run that way?" Han Sen gritted his teeth and returned to the tangled forest floor. He put Qin Xian down and ran in another direction, attempting to draw the centipede away. Han Sen successfully drew away the flying centipede, and it went back to chasing him through the forest. Many trees were toppled in its rampage, and many of the forest's other creatures were promptly evicted. Those that could fly soared away in fright, whereas others fled as quickly as they could on foot. Every other creature in the forest seemed terrified of the centipede. Han Sen opened his gene lock and used Dongxian Sutra to simulate the light sun of God's energy flow. It increased his speed by a good deal, but even then, it wasn't enough to gain a good lead on the foe that pursued him. All he could focus on doing was running as fast as he could and not slacking into the hungry mandibles that were chasing him. This monster was incredibly powerful, and it was something the Adiraid would surely struggle to beat. The Adiraid wasn't weak, but the size between the two was not comparable. The blood centipede had a unique power that made it far stronger than the Adiraid too. The Adiraid could protect herself, but she couldn't stop the blood centipede. That was why Han Sen could only try to escape. In this large, dense, and ancient forest, Han Sen ran as fast as his legs could carry him. He had been doing so for a while, and he had gradually lost all sense of direction. Han Sen thought about throwing the centipede's egg away, but he didn't want to. Han Sen tried to let the little angel draw the attention of the centipede, but it was as if it had locked onto Han Sen, without a care for anything else. The little angel swung her great sword at the centipede many times, but the creature had countless wriggling legs that blocked each attempted attack. She couldn't get a hit in. Han Sen kept running until there were no more trees to evade. After leaving the canopy of the forest behind, he found himself before the slopes of a grand mountain range. He had no idea where he had come to. Han Sen had no other choice but to run headlong up the mountain. He circled one of the mountains and tried his hand at fighting the centipede for a bit.
Han Sen felt strange.
When he was in the ancient forest, he had seen many creatures fleeing for their lives. But these mountains were barren, and not a single creature was around. After running the length of 2 mountains, he hadn't managed to see a single other creature. It was a dull, lifeless region, composed of gray crags. Few plants grew there, also. Han Sen did not have the time to stop, poke about and ponder the area he had stumbled into, however. With his gene lock running, he was on a timer. He had been running for half a day, and he was already starting to feel exhausted. His body was in agony, and he feared if he kept going, his body might end up permanently damaged. But still, he couldn't afford to stop, and turning off the gene lock would remove his ability to simulate the light sun of God's energy flow. This would result in his speed decreasing, and the chance of him not being able to outrun the centipede's crazed pursuit. Han Sen gritted his teeth and took the centipede egg from his pocket, planning to throw it at the centipede, so he could escape the area with life. He turned around to take a look and noticed that the blood centipede was no longer directly behind him. In fact, the centipede was down near the foothills, merely crying out to Han Senator it didn't come after him, as if it were afraid of something. Han Sen was surprised, to say the least. He looked around and saw nothing out of the ordinary. While the craggy mountains appeared nearly identical, during his run, he had drawn close to a mountain that was different than the others. The mountains around the one he was on were gray and rocky, but the one he was on now was blue. The rocks there appeared to be metallic. He wasn't sure what made this mountain so unique, but the scary centipede only roared and did not come up. Despite its desire for Han Sen's blood, all it did was twirl and writhe around, breaking the rocks that peppered the foothills. Its power did not matter in the shadow of the blue mountain. It appeared. Han Sen acknowledged something was wrong, and so he quickly cast Dongxian aura. Still, he did not notice the presence of anything strange around. There did not seem to be any life on this mountain. Han Sen felt relieved, for he was at least out of danger for the time being. But he couldn't relax, for the radius of his Dongxian aura was limited, and it did not reveal all that may have been there. Han Sen then raised his head to look up the mountain. The mountain was massive, and its head rested above the clouds. He could not see what secrets its peak might have hidden. And as for the rest of the mountain, it was as barren as ever. It was entirely blue, and only metallic rocks resided there for decoration. There wasn't even a single blade of grass. What is that blood centipede afraid of? Even with its baby having been nicked, it doesn't dare set foot up here. Something has to be amiss with this place. Han Sen looked up the mountain and could not see anything through the mist that cloaked the top. Although Han Sen was curious about what may have been up there, he had respect for the proverb that concerned itself with feline mammals and the consequences of their curiosity. Therefore, he resolved to walk around to the other side of the mountain and descend that way, in an attempt to escape the centipede. The red centipede still did not dare ascend the blue mountain, and it only stared at Han Senator, but wherever he went, the monster carefully followed him. Han Sen gritted his teeth again and placed the centipede egg between the rocks of the blue mountain. Then, he went in another direction. He hoped the centipede would remain, showing concern for the egg more than the person who had stolen it. But things did not turn out the way he expected. When the centipede saw its egg, it only enraged the centipede further. It still wouldn't ascend the blue mountain, and instead, it wriggled with greater ferocity as it traced Han Senator. Its exclamations were even louder, as well, and the pitch of the echo was heightened as its wretched voice carried across the mountain range. The sound of rocks breaking continued under the jittery legs of the centipede as it traced the egg thief. Big marks and clefts were left in each ravaged rock. This guy really wants me dead.
Han Sen's heart sank.
He imagined the best he could do right now was use his little angel to take the egg and lead the monster away. But just as Han Sen was willing to do this, he suddenly heard the sound of a bell toll from atop the mountain.
Young.
The sound of an ancient bell rung from high above, echoing across the expanse of mountains. It caused the energy inside Han Sen to turn into chaos, and he quickly ran Dongxian Sutra to quell his disturbed flow.
Young.
When the bell rang again, a weird power caused the energy inside him to coil and swirl in turmoil once more. Han Sen gritted his teeth and continued casting Dongxian Sutra to soothe the restless energy and fight back against the mysterious tone of the bell. The bell's sound was quite beautiful. It possessed a certain power that cast what seemed like a sonic wave, dispelling the mist and clouds that obscured the peak of the mountain. Like a curtain being pulled, the entirety of the blue mountain was then revealed. There were 6 different bell tones in total, and Han Sen managed to hold on against their clanging. But later, it took him half an hour to fix the energy that had been disturbed inside him. Slowly, he opened his eyes. The mist that veiled the peak was gone, and now, only wisps circled the mountain instead. You could see the clouds 1,000 meters away from the mountainside, as there were no more clouds within or beyond the circle. Han Sen looked at the blue mountain's peak and tried to see what was there. He was eager to learn where exactly the bell had told from.
Han Sen's pupils shrunk.
He saw a mysterious, blue shelter residing atop the peak. Its presence there was like a castle perched in the heavens. The blue shelter looked rugged, though, Many parts of the building had fallen and crumbled. Even the gate of the front wall had fallen, succumbing to mounds of dust. The place looked as if it had been abandoned a long time ago. Shelter? How can there be a shelter out here? I wonder, is it a human or spirit shelter? Han Sen observed the distant shelter as best he could, but did not see too much. Although it seemed to have decayed over time's relentless march, it still looked solid, perhaps even operable. It looks like the shelter isn't home to any humans or creatures. If it is, why would it be in the state it currently is? But then again, why would the blood centipede be so afraid of it? It won't even ascend the measly foothills of this mountain. Does a scary creature reside in the shelter? Maybe? While Han Sen pondered the stockpile of questions that now occurred to him, he saw the blood centipede start moving again. After the broken shelter had revealed itself, the blood centipede possessed what seemed like a renewed courage, and it rapidly climbed the mountain after Han Sen. Han Sen froze, and when he thawed soon after, he quickly took off running up the mountain. The monster had most likely believed the shelter was whole, which held off its initial advance. But now that it knew the shelter was an abandoned ruin, it ascended the mountain without fear. Han Sen had no other choice but to ascend. He hastened his brisk steps to ramble and climb his way up to the shelter. It was a decayed structure, and it didn't look like anyone lived up there, but if there was still a teleporter inside, and it was still in working condition, he could escape by returning to the Alliance. But before Han Sen could teleport away, he thought it would best to eat the egg first. The blood centipede was quickly catching up to Han Sen, who was now standing in front of the blue shelter. He noticed that the structure had been composed of blue metal. With such sturdy construction, Han Sen pondered what events may have led to its ruin and downfall. A 20-meter-tall, few-meter-wide metal wall extended for a few miles. Along its length, it was broken and ruined in a number of different locations. Han Sen observed the dust-cloaked shelter and pondered the number of years it had been since a person last set foot inside it. Han Sen was quite ecstatic at his discovery of an abandoned shelter. All he would have to do now was find a teleporter and leave. No matter how powerful the centipede was, it couldn't follow him through. Han Sen ran inside the shelter and strode across the thick dust that had gathered so deeply that it felt like snow. The blood centipede followed Han Sen to the front of the shelter. It hesitated before the entrance for a moment, but still decided to follow him inside. The blue metal shelter had many toppled buildings, and many structures only had one or two disheveled walls remaining. Some had been cut in half, or even had their roofs shaved off. Han Sen's run kept him weaving left and right between the remains of old buildings and constructs to avoid the centipede's pursuit. But by now, he was getting exhausted. He summoned the little angel and gave her the egg, bidding that she fly away from him to the other side of the shelter. The blood centipede shrieked at Han Sen, but turned around and gave pursuit to the little angel now instead. Han Sen had finally achieved a moment's reprieve. He moved around the decayed shelter in search of a teleporter that may have fared better than the rest of the area. He had searched through a number of ruined buildings and was still in awe of the devastation. The entire area was a mess, as shrapnel and bits of twisted metal lay strewn about every corner. But thus far, unfortunately, he was unable to find a teleporter that was in good shape. In his search, he stumbled into a plaza which contained a half-toppled bell tower in its center. The bell was composed of blue copper, and it exuded an aura of mystique. Strange carvings were etched into the metal of its composition, with many of the drawn shapes resembling bugs. Han Sen saw this blue bell and wondered, if this place had indeed been abandoned, why had 6 bells rung out earlier? Han Sen looked around, observing the thick dust that coated each crevice of the lost shelter. He didn't see any footprints or marks that suggested occupation. Even the blue bell was covered in dust and ash. He believed it must have been years since a person last touched the bell. The tolling bell could not have been this one. Han Sen flapped his wings and flew onto the bell tower to take a closer look. Han Sen was then hit with a sudden surprise. There was a body inside the bell tower that looked like a human in rugged clothes. Through decay over time, the body was little more than a dust-covered skeleton. Han Sen summoned a lance to poke the clothing that once dressed the deceased. With little effort, the clothes and bones fell apart into ash. Was this a human shelter that got attacked by some fearsome creature? Han Sen came down from the bell tower and treaded the shelter with a little more care this time. Han Sen summoned his super armor in case something unfortunate was about to happen. Since there weren't any other humans around, no one would see or recognize him. The fallen metal buildings were everywhere, and he couldn't find a single building that had been left untouched. Most of the houses did not contain teleporters, and the ones Han Sen found were broken and had ceased to function. Han Sen later discovered many other skeletal remains that were similar to the first one. For some reason, all it took was a little touch for the remains to crumble and wholly collapse. Han Sen had searched through half the shelter so far and had yet to find a single working teleporter. The little angel was on the other side, keeping the blood centipede busy. He didn't fancy venturing that way. Strange. Aside from the blue copper bell, there aren't any other bell towers here. There aren't any other bells at all. What tolling bells did I hear?
Han Sen tweaked. Putsled.
While Han Sen was deep in thought, he heard the mystery bells ring once more like thunder. The shock was so strong, he almost collapsed. Han Sen quickly ran his Dongxian Sutra to quell the energy inside him. He raised his head and saw the bell in the bell tower was ringing, all by itself. Not even a stiff wind brushed it, yet it tolled. Why is this happening to me? Why does the bell ring itself? Han Sen tried his best to calm the energy inside him as he stared at the bell. The little angel and the blood centipede stopped fighting, as if they were both affected by the bell as well.
Young.
The blue bell rang again, at an even scarier tone than before. It was loud, like an explosion detonating right on Han Sen's eardrum. The tolling of the bell, when he had been further down the mountain, was not as strong as what he was hearing now. Because he was so close to it, every ring was like a thunderbolt that convulsed his body and caused him to spit blood from his mouth.
Young. Young. Young.
The blue bell continued to ring, and Han Sen continued to writhe, oozing blood from his mouth. He used the Dongxian Sutra the best he could to fight back the damage caused by the loud tolling of the bell. Although the Dongxian Sutra was powerful, it didn't provide enough relief to fight back the noise. The energy inside Han Sen went insane, and the chaos inside highlighted every vein that coursed through his body. A green vein, in particular, began to expand in his body, looking ready to rupture. Some of his smaller veins were broken already, which dyed his skin red. It was a frightening sight to witness. The blood centipede was not doing any better. In its agony, it twisted and wriggled around on the ground, toppling many buildings. Its madness only generated more noise. The blue bell seemed to deal damage to any creature that heard it. The more energy a creature had, the more damage it suffered. The blood centipede must have been a second-generation super creature. Its energy was incredibly powerful, but it could not withstand the noise of the bell, and as a result, its energy was disturbed. Its innards were a mess as its energy caused chaos within. The centipede twirled round and round in a craze. The little angel, however, was not affected. Her body's energy exuded a holy presence, and because of her purity, the bell could not deal damage to her. But the little angel still had to fight back the noise, and so couldn't do anything else. Cough. Han Sen heaved another unhealthy amount of blood. His Dongxian Sutra could just about manage to deal with the noise, but his fitness was lacking. As such, he couldn't deal with it half as well as the little angel could. The Adorade was not a protector pet, so there was nothing she could do for Han Senator, so Han Sen continued to cough up blood with the feeling that his body was going to implode. He knew things weren't going well, and his predicament was a dire one. He had to think of something. He was wearing his super armor, but it provided no resistance to the bell's tolling. Suddenly, Han Sen's mind flashed back to the berserk devil unicorn that had finished evolving. He summoned it before he considered whether or not it would even work. The black smoke whirled around Han Sen like a black hole. The sonic pulse pounded the black smoke, which caused a bit of it to evaporate. Its disappearance revealed Han Sen slightly, consumed by the protective smoke. But when the noise halted for a moment, the black smoke fully rejuvenated. It was like a shield, protecting Han Sen. Through the black smoke's protection, Han Sen didn't feel as affected by the tolling of the bell. Now, his Dongxian Sutra was able to fight it. The discord of his energy began to simmer and settle down as the veins relaxed and returned to their ordinary size and shape beneath his skin. That's some good stuff. Han Sen was overjoyed. He then thought to himself, if the devil unicorn can block elemental attacks, does that mean the bell's noise is a special sort of element itself?
Young, young, young.
The blue bell rang another 9 times. The noise felt as if it were rocking the entirety of the world. Those who heard it felt as if they could die any second. The blood centipede had been writhing on the floor, and it consistently spewed blood from its mouth due to the discord in its body. After 9 times, the bell stopped. There was no more noise. But that only led Han Sen to discover something even more frightening. The blue bell was alive. It started flying and looking set to crush Han Sen. It suddenly went right for him without cause. Inside the blue bell was a blue metal chain, and at the bottom of the chain was a cone-shaped blue metal ringer. The ringer was the reason the bell had rung. Luckily, Han Sen's energy was no longer messed up and he could focus. Quickly, he jumped and rolled away, evading the blue bell that tried to land on top of him. Fortunately, the bell was not as quick as he feared it might be, which allowed Han Sen to dodge the attack. The blue bell missed Han Sen, but it didn't try again. It immediately stopped going after Han Sen and went after the blood centipede instead. The bell spun around and around like a saucer as it went. When it arrived, the bell that was only as tall as a human morphed its shape. As it hovered above the writhing centipede, it expanded until it was large enough to consume the entire creature. Seeing this gave Han Sen the heebie-jeebies. Boom! The blue bell landed atop the twisting centipede, and then Han Sen heard noises come from within. He heard the centipede trying to fight its way out of the bell's entrapment. The noise that emanated from the bell was not unlike the ringing he had heard earlier. Every tone was a shock, and Han Sen had only his devil unicorn to repel it. Of course, it wasn't half as effective as the noises from earlier, as it wasn't a proper tolling. These noises were created by the panicked centipede, and as such, the devil unicorn could block each pulse. Han Sen carefully observed the bell once more and did not see anything too strange. Many patterns, shapes, and symbols of bugs had been etched as adornments on the bell. As fascinating as they were, Han Sen had no idea what they meant. The blood centipede continued fighting on the inside for half an hour, until its noise gradually weakened. After another half an hour passed, there was no more movement to be heard at all. Han Sen then finally saw the blue bell move again. It spun around in the air again before shrinking down to its initial size. When it was about as tall as a human again, it went for the little angel. From its time beneath the bell, the blood centipede had now become nothing but bones. It looked as if it had been dead for a good many years, just like the bones Han Sen had seen earlier. But the little angel wasn't threatened. She dodged the incoming bell with ease and then smacked it heavily with her great sword. A deep cleft was left in the bell's side, which made the object squirm backwards and unleash more of its horrible tolling sounds. The little angel's energy was messed up as a result, and she had to cast her energy flow skill to ease it. She could not dodge the bell's attack due to this, and all she saw was the bell spinning towards her. The little angel hastened her cast and was able to quell her inner turmoil and evade the bell's strike with just enough time. Still, by exerting so much effort, her energy had become even more messed up. Han Sen then decided to summon the little angel back to the Sea of Soul, which made the bell lose its target. But after the little angel disappeared, it did not turn its attention to Han Sen as it had previously. It merely flew back to the bell tower and reattached itself. What is that thing? Is that a super creature? Han Sen was flabbergasted. Aside from that, he couldn't think of what else it could have been. Han Sen had never heard of a super creature using bell noises to kill people before. Han Sen looked at the bell once more and then walked near the corpse of the blood centipede. When Han Sen touched it with a bit of strength, it crumbled into dust. This blood centipede's essence has been drained by the bell. Han Sen was surprised. Clearly, the monster bell used the tolling sound to screw with the energy flows of its potential victims. When people or creatures were in pain and struggling with the confusion of their energy going haywire, the bell would fly out to cover them. That was what had happened to the blood centipede. Such a terrifyingly powerful foe was completely drained of its essence in less than an hour. Han Sen now knew the bell was a frightening thing. But fortunately, it was slow. And if you could repel the noise, then you didn't have to be too afraid of the fiend. The blue bell only attacked Han Sen once, and after he dodged it, it didn't attempt to get him again. It had some intelligence, that much was certain. It most likely realized Han Sen was too agile for it, and there was no use going after him. What a strange super creature. I wonder what manner of beast soul I would receive if I killed it. Han Sen gave the blue bell another look, the grimace of greed creeping upon his face. But killing the bell wouldn't be easy. Merely attacking it would generate the sound that disturbed energy flows. Hurting the monster meant hurting yourself. There would have to be another solution for killing it. It was a shame the little angel was not a spirit. If she was a spirit, she could use the devil unicorn beast soul herself. With the protection of the devil unicorn, her energy would not be disrupted, and she could fight the bell with all her power. But she wasn't a spirit. She was a pet. She was unable to use any beast souls. As a result, Han Sen continued to observe the bell for a good long while, but he could not come up with a better solution. He summoned his little angel again and got her to attack the blue bell once more.
Young.
The little angel struck the bell with all her might, and it rang with its wretched toll. The strike did leave a decent mark on the bell, however, and it became enraged in response. It flew madly towards the little angel, attempting to swallow her. Han Sen immediately returned his little angel. Having lost its attacker, the bell returned to the tower and reattached itself. This could work. Han Sen was delightfully surprised. He re-summoned his little angel and had her attack the bell once again. He cheesed it this way, many, many times. The bell was covered in clefts and deep cuts before long. When the bell lost all patience with its phantom attacker, it started to toll itself.
Young. Young. Young.
The horrible bell noise racketed across the shelter and beyond. Han Sen put the little angel back in the Sea of Soul and used the devil unicorn to shield himself from the noise's effect. After a while, the bell stopped ringing. Then, Han Sen got back to it. He summoned his little angel and bid for her to attack the bell once again. After she attacked, the blue bell took off in flight. This time, it was going away from the shelter, as if it wanted to escape. Han Sen didn't want this, so he commanded the little angel to chase after it.
Young.
Another ringing sound erupted, and the little angel froze in the air. Fortunately, Han Sen was able to summon her back in time. It seems like it is still able to toll, even during its flight. The sound is definitely weaker than when it was stationary, however. Han Sen waited until the bell stopped ringing before resuming the chase. The blue bell did not fly very fast, and he was able to catch up, even with his sacred blood wings. When he got close to it, he summoned his little angel to attack it again. Across the mountains, the sound of a malfunctioning bell echoed far and wide. No creature dared to come near the airborne fighters. Han Sen now knew the meaning of, everything gets a return. Han Sen and Little Angel were unable to fight the powerful blood centipede, but with a small amount of effort, the blue bell had managed to do what they could not. And now, the bell was the one now being chased by Han Sen and the Little Angel. Han Sen trailed behind it and used his Dongxian aura to scan the bell. Han Sen could not sense a life force on the blue bell at all times. He could only sense it when the bell started ringing. Han Sen, as he observed the energy flow, thought it was quite strange. Han Sen and the Little Angel chased it 1,000 miles. There were countless marks scraped across the entire body of the bell, and they had lost count of how many times they had struck it. Eventually, however, victory was achieved when the bell was hewn in half. It no longer rang after its final hit, and it crash-landed in relative silence. Super creature hunted. Death knell. The beast's soul has been acquired. Its flesh cannot be consumed, but you may collect the life geno essence and obtain a random numeric amount of super geno points, ranging from 0 to 10. The announcement chimed in Han Sen's head, which brought him great joy. But when he looked at the remains of the death knell that had been sliced in half, it didn't disappear. It remained where it had fallen. Can this guy be considered a second-generation super creature or third-generation super creature? Don't tell me a bell can produce babies. That would be hilarious. Han Sen continued to observe it, pondering whether or not it could produce offspring. But he didn't concern himself with the question for too long before seeking to retrieve the life geno essence instead. The bell did not have any flesh. Aside from its outer shape, there was only the metal chain and pendant inside. Han Sen looked at the pendant and summoned the little angel. He asked her to strike the pendant, which cracked open to release its blue life geno essence. "I am going to be rich. A centipede egg and a life geno essence? And the strange death knell's beast soul on top of all that? I have earned a lot today." Han Sen was more than pleased. He took another look at the shattered pieces of the slain bell, which lay scattered about. He brought out a bag and collected all the broken bits, crushing some of the bigger parts to fit them all in. Then he summoned his golden roar and placed the bag on it. With his rewards in hand, he turned to ride away. Han Sen put away the life geno essence and let the little angel crack the blood centipede's egg open for him. The little angel sliced the egg, and that chimed the announcement. "Super creature hunted, 1,000-blade blood dragon baby. The beast's soul has not been acquired. Consume its flesh to obtain a random numeric amount of super geno points, ranging from 0 to 10. Han Sen quickly lifted the egg that had been cracked open and consumed the yolk that was inside. The juice tasted like coconut, and it was quite nice. It surprised him, as it didn't taste like any creature. 1,000-blade blood dragon baby consumed. You have received 1 super geno point. This notification played a few times, and a huge smile burst on Han Sen's face. Try as he might, he could not stop grinning. A warmth swirled around inside his body and blended with his blood. The blood cells seemed to quickly morph, and they felt different from before. When all was said and done, the 1,000-blade blood dragon baby had given Han Sen 7 super geno points, which brought his total super geno tally up to 24. His fitness felt an immediate increase. After consuming the 1,000-blade blood dragon baby, Han Sen spent some time researching the energy flow of the blue bell. If he could simulate its energy flow, he could absorb its life geno essence. Han Sen used Dongxian Sutra to simulate death knell's energy flow and felt his entire body vibrate. He heard the sound of a bell ring, and his body throbbed to its chime. Han Sen flicked his arm, which generated a noise not unlike the death knell. The bell sounds no longer affected Han Sen, but they made the golden roarer by his side shake. This is interesting. If I use this skill, and people hit me, it should issue the same results as the death knell did. The sound generated should screw with an attacker's energy flow. Although I cannot simulate it to its original power, it might still come in handy. But this bell noise affects everyone and everything. It can even hurt my friends. I need to be careful when and where I use it, lest I commit friendly fire. Han Sen was quite interested in death knell's energy flow. He tried it out for a while before trying to refine the bell's life geno essence. As Han Sen began to refine the blue metal life geno essence, the cells in his body started to become lively. Although the life geno essence was named after death, its effects were to provide rebirth and a strengthening of one's genes and very life. When the refinement process was complete, Han Sen's absorbance of the death knell life geno essence provided him 8 super geno points. This brought his total super geno tally up to 32. These are some good rewards I have received. If this continues, it won't be long before I max out my super geno points. But Han Sen had to ask himself a serious question. Was he strong enough to visit his mother's shelter? With his own power and the aid of the silver fox and little angel, few creatures could threaten him. As such, he could consider going to visit her. Although the trek to see her would be a few 100,000 miles long, Han Sen had to go. If he didn't, he wouldn't be able to help his mother increase her super geno points. If his mother could max out her super geno points, she would have a much higher chance of surviving when she became a surpasser. Becoming a surpasser meant you would obtain another 100-year lifespan. When your lifespan was over, you'd have to take a chance rather than sitting there, waiting to die. Han Sen was now preparing to ask for Huang Fu's help. He wanted to establish the road he might take that would lead him all the way to where his mother lived. He could kill super creatures along the way, meaning it would not be a fruitless effort for himself, either.
Han Sen.
As Han Sen walked past a human shelter, someone called his name. Han Sen heard the voice and noticed it sounded familiar. He could not, however, recall to whom it belonged. He turned around and saw a big man running towards him, which surprised him. Brother Fist? Han Sen shouted when his eyes recognized the face. He was one of the leaders of the Steel Armor Shelter's army. Although he never spent much time with Han Sen, they had a friendly relationship and had cooperated on various occasions. Brother Fist was a friend of Fang Jingqi, and Fang Jingqi was one of Fang Xuexi's elder brothers, who had grown up with Han. Senator Brother Fist was also a good friend of Tang Zhenliu. That was why they respected each other, despite not having done much together. It really is you. That's awesome. Brother Fist was enthusiastic, but Han Sen wasn't sure why he was so ecstatic to see him. He approached Han Sen and gave him a big hug. Han Sen froze, thinking he was being too passionate in his greeting. The hug was strong, and he thought his back might break if the man squeezed any tighter. Brother Fist, I know you love me, but I am a raging heterosexual, and this is getting a little awkward. Han Sen slipped out of his grasp. Han Sen was quite tall himself, but Brother Fist was even taller, standing about 2 meters tall. You feel awkward? I don't. Brother Fist patted Han Sen's shoulder, smiling as he spoke. Han Sen immediately felt a shiver run down his spine as he looked at him. Fist laughed and said, I do love you. I love you so much. Seeing you here brings tears of joy to my eyes. So why don't you come help me and Fang take a spirit shelter? Fang Jingqi is here? Han Sen asked, with a tone of surprise. Me and him are stuck at the hip. We are like 2 peas in a pod. I can't believe we both arrived here in this dump upon our arrival at the second god's sanctuary. There are no resources here, and neither are there many elites. I still need to collect a whole trove of sacred Geno points, so we're making plans to take down a royal shelter to make our lives easier going forward. There is a small number of elites nearby, and we figured we would have need of their help. But here you come, passing me by? It's a stroke of good fortune. Brother Fist tugged at Han Sen's arms as he kept walking and explaining how things had been. The area was a little better than the ice field had been when Han Sen first arrived there. Still, there hadn't been much change since. Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi were not living here happily. As a result, Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi were therefore trying to take down a royal shelter that resided at the base of a nearby mountain, so they could have a safer place to stay. It would provide them a base before the rest of the mountain. As well, it would be a humble beginning for their future endeavors, which would include hunting many of the monsters that resided on the mountain beside it. Han Sen followed Brother Fist to a night-class shelter. Fang Jingqi was there, and when he saw Han Sen, he had a similar reaction to Brother Fist and said, Han Sen, what brings you here? Oh, what a wonderful opportunity. We are off to try to take down a royal shelter, so you should join us. Han Sen smiled and agreed. He'd be able to obtain a new royal spirit and at the same time help old friends. He didn't see a reason why he should refuse their polite request. It had been a long time since Han Sen last collected a spirit, and he hoped it would be another beautiful lady spirit. She'd fit in nicely in the ranks of his goddess army. I was thinking, we might not have enough elites, but with Han Sen here, we can alter the plans somewhat, and as a result, have a much higher chance of conquering the shelter, Brother Fist excitedly proposed. Cool. Today, the Thunder Shelter and the Devil God Shelter's people are coming. When they arrive, we can discuss any new proceedings with them, Fang Jingqi said, with much excitement as well. Clearly, they had no idea Han Sen owned a super pet and had achieved what he thought to be common knowledge. They just believed Han Sen was any old, ordinary elite. Han Sen did not spoil their perception and simply allowed them to arrange everything. He only had to help them and get the royal spirit when the time came. With his power, there was no possibility of him failing. But when Fang Jingqi and Brother Fist brought Han Sen over to discuss matters with the others, there were disagreements. Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi knew Han Sen was an elite, so they wanted him to receive a higher share. The people from the Thunder Shelter and Devil's God Shelter, however, did not agree. They insisted Han Sen was just another component of the team, and he shouldn't receive preferential treatment when it came to the distribution of loot. They argued about it for some time, with no resolution. If you guys say he is as strong as he is, then why don't you two just go with him and get it done without us? The Thunder Shelter's people said, as they started to get annoyed. Xinjiang, how can you say that? We are cooperating to take down the shelter together. We have plenty of time to discuss this, Brother Fist said, frowning. Xinjiang, from the Thunder Shelter, replied, if we are cooperating, then we should use the contract we have already signed and settled on. For you to go out in search of someone else is a concern of yours, where the rewards come directly out of your own shares. You cannot burden us with someone whose aid we have not asked for. Why should we give him anything? With our manpower like this, taking down the royal shelter will cost us much. Han Sen is a fierce and strong elite. He can secure our victory. Our sacrifices will be considerably lessened by his presence, I assure you, Brother Fist explained. Han Sen wasn't really interested in this talk of a cut. All he wanted was a new spirit, and he'd have long been gone had the possibility of earning one not been a prospect. Extra money made no difference to him, so earning a cut didn't really entice him. Furthermore, he'd be under obligation to aid the shelter in the future if it ran into any issues. But Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi had already made a mention of his supposed desire for a cut. Even though he didn't want any shares, if he were to correct them, he'd do nothing but embarrass them. Oh, come on. Who do you think this guy is? Coin? If he's that good, then why bother coming to look for us? Go and take down the shelter all by yourselves. They can do that, can't they, Lu? Xinjiang then dragged the Devil God Shelter's leader, Lu Tai, into the argument. Lu Tai said, Qian is correct. After everything was supposedly prepared, you are the one who has brought an extra person into this. Our shares have been settled, therefore, there is no need for us to make a change that would accommodate him. Xinjiang and Lu Tai were not budging on their stance, and Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi could not take back their proposal. Brother Fang and Brother Fist, can you guard the shelter? Han Sen asked them, seeing that their argument had now come to a standstill. Brother Fist wasn't sure what Han Sen meant, but right now, he couldn't allow anyone to believe he was weak. In fact, Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi were the strongest evolvers in the region. The Thunder Shelter and the Devil God Shelter combined would not have the strength to take them on. They wanted more resources, which was why they wanted to take on the Royal Shelter. They had already pledged a large amount of their earnings to the other two shelters evenly, accepting only a third. It was a generous offer. If things were done properly, where shares correlated with the actual power of the parties involved in the deal, Brother Fist ought to have received at least 50% of the entire pie. There were not many people in his rank, and Brother Fist wanted to take down the shelter with haste. Therefore, he conceded to accept this lesser amount.
Fine.
There is no need to cooperate. We will indeed tackle it ourselves, Han Sen said. When Han Sen said that, everyone just looked at him without saying a word. Brother Fist looked ready to say something, and he moved his lips to do so, but no words were vocally drawn. He thought Han Sen had suggested something ludicrous and quite frankly impossible. If they could not take it, it would only lead to trouble. But again, he did not want to look weak, and so he held back what he initially wanted to say. Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi, do you really trust this man that much? Xinjiang asked, with a tone of disdain. Lu Tai then added, does that mean an end to our proposed cooperation? Brother Fist was unsure of how to respond. He looked at Fang Jingqi, who squinted his eyes and said, yes, it does. I wish this day could have proceeded as planned, but you were unwilling to budge on your stance. Thus, we have no choice but to pull out.
Fine.
We'll eagerly await the news of how you and your pretty boy elite fare in attempting this conquest of a royal shelter, Xinjiang said, with a strange tone. Then, he left, but not before giving Han Sen one last stare of disapproval. Lu Tai looked at Han Sen and Fang Jingqi, but did not say anything. He also just left. Fang, this is possible, yes? Brother Fist did not have much of a background, and he hadn't heard the recent tales of Han Sen's accomplishments. Fang Jingqi smiled and said, if Han Sen says okay, then everything will be okay. This guy is awesome. He can even slay super creatures. Fang Jingqi had recently spent much time in his shelter, preparing for the attack. He hadn't heard about Han Sen owning a super pet, but he had heard of his initial slaying of one super creature. He just wasn't entirely sure if the story was true. Fang Jingqi also had history with Han Sen, and he knew he wouldn't say something unless he was absolutely sure of it. That was why Fang Jingqi did not hesitate in ending their cooperation. He killed a super creature? Really? I thought people only said some person from the G family killed one, but that was in the first god's sanctuary. Brother Fist looked at Han Sen with shock and disbelief. It was just luck. A lot of people knew about this story, so there was no need to lie about the tale's authenticity. Therefore, he confirmed it. Holy crap! You really killed a super creature? Hearing Han Sen say that, Brother Fist still struggled to believe him. Han Sen had arrived at the second god's sanctuary much later than Brother Fist did, and he lacked the confidence to slay even a sacred blood creature. Therefore, it was quite difficult to believe Han Sen already had what it took to take down a super creature. Haha, I'm just a lucky guy, Han Sen said again. Holy crap indeed. Why did you not say something about this earlier? If I knew you were this strong, I wouldn't even have had to talk to them. You could solo a royal shelter easily. After Brother Fist was assured Han Sen really did kill a super creature, he shouted these words out in utter glee. But Han Sen then looked to the sky and said, I'm afraid this will be difficult. That's okay. Me and Fong have a few people, and we can all accompany you. We are taking this royal shelter, no matter what. It will be difficult not to incur any losses, but even if Qin Jiang and Lu Tai show up to take advantage, we can guard the place without error, Brother Fist said. No. I meant, it is difficult to go now. If I go now, I won't be back in time for my lunch, Han Sen said. Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi froze for a bit, but then Fang Jingqi smiled and said, You bastard, trying to make us feel bad. Brother Fist did not mind that, however, and he said, You don't need lunch. If we're taking a royal shelter, what use would it be to come back here? I will roast meat and heat up wine for you, right then and there. My Fist family makes the best grilled meat. I'll have you know. All right then, let's go, Han Sen said. We have 8 people with a fitness of over 100, and we have over 100 people with a fitness level above 60. How would you like to separate them? Brother Fist asked Han Sen, as they now asserted him as their leader. It depends on you. If you would like to hunt more creatures, then by all means bring more. If you do not need to kill them all, then just bring enough people to take over the shelter.
Han Sen smiled.
Brother Fist was frozen. Hearing what Han Sen said, it sounded like they wouldn't have to bring anyone. Fang Jingqi smiled and said, Bring Wang Hu and his men. We will take the shelter, but not kill the creatures there, in case Qian Jiang seeks to take advantage of our vulnerability. Are Fist and Fang Jingqi crazy? They are actually going to try to conquer the shelter with just their own people? Qian Jiang and Lu Tai, after hearing word of their endeavor, were shocked. Upon leaving, they merely thought Brother Fist would renegotiate with Han Sen and have him take a step back. They never expected them to follow through with what they had said and actually go there with only their own men. Qin Jiang and Lu Tai quickly rallied their troops and went out near the shelter to watch how things fared for them. If they had the opportunity, they'd waylay and try to mooch off their efforts. If Brother Fist and his people were injured during their fights, but were overall nearing success, they imagined they could swoop in and claim the entire shelter for themselves. When they arrived, they saw Brother Fist atop his mount, racing towards the shelter. They were fast approaching the gate. Brother Fist did not falter or slow, and simply followed Han Sen's lead into battle. They were attempting to siege the shelter directly by attacking the main gate. What are they thinking? Do they honestly believe they can take on a shelter like this?
Liu Tai frowned.
Taking on a shelter from the front would consume far too much power, he thought. Many creatures poured out of the shelter to greet their would-be conquerors. There were wolves, bears, a variety of 10-meter-tall beasts, and a 50-meter-long snake. There were even birds, taking off into the skies so they could assail them from above. One bird had a wingspan of 20 meters. Han Sen was riding his golden growler, leading the siege. The spirit shelter was rather powerful, but it was still weaker than Princess Yin Yang's shelter. The spirit was not atop the tower, either. All that appeared before them were legions of creatures. This entire scene had become familiar to Han Sen over his time as an evolver. Without blinking, he charged in. A green-winged bird soared through the skies like a green cloud that blotted out the sun. Its presence darkened the region as it descended. Han Sen did not blink and merely waited for it to complete its descent. When it did, he summoned his flaming Rex spike and swung it upwards. In one hit, the monster was cut in half. Blood and feathers danced in the air like rain. Sacred blood creature hunted. Green cloud eagle. The beast's soul has not been acquired. Consume its flesh to obtain a random numeric amount of sacred geno points, ranging from 0 to 10. Brother Fist and the rest, who witnessed this scene, were shocked but happy. They called aloud with grand excitement. Qin Jiang and Lu Tai were taken aback after seeing this. To see a giant sacred blood bird creature killed in one hit like that was a frightening thing. Seeing Han Sen and Brother Fist assaulted the shelter like a tidal wave. All the creatures before them were slain by Han Sen's relentless Rex Spike. All that was left in their wake was blood and the dismembered corpses of the creatures that defended the shelter in vain. It was impossible to gauge how many creatures they had already killed. A 10-meter-tall beast roared. On his approach towards it, Han Sen leapt off of Golden Growler's back and brought his flaming Rex Spike down on the creature's head. The weapon went clean through, splitting the monster in two, each split side of the beast falling a separate way as a heap of guts dropped directly down to the ground. When Han Sen landed, the Golden Growler was by his side. Immediately, he leapt onto his mount and continued the siege. He was an unstoppable force. A 50-meter-long snake now guarded their approach. Han Sen thrust into it with his Rex Spike and threw it into the sky. While it was still airborne, Han Sen sliced and diced it into a rain of snake bits, which fell down to the ground with thudding noises. Each piece left a deep hole. Countless wolves and bears were killed without reprieve, their charred remains illuminating the battlefield. The guy was a killing machine, and within seconds, he was right before the entrance of the shelter. Qin Jiang and Lu Tai had made plans to sneak in some easy kills, but they made no movement. They were frozen in absolute shock at what they had just witnessed. So many sacred blood creatures had been laid to waste, like chickens and pigs in a slaughterhouse grinder. The entire army did not slow down for a second, and immediately hacked their way inside. Who is this man? Qin Jiang and Lu Tai had questions coming out the rear. Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi, on the other hand, were surprised. They knew Han Sen was strong, but not that strong. Under the pressure of his wretched, flaming weapon, not a single creature was given the opportunity to fight back. Swing after bloody swing, his approach was unhalted. Without any true adversity, Han Sen delivered them swiftly to the Spirit Hall. There, they saw a figure wearing steel armor. This person was 4 meters tall, and he wielded a great axe that was larger than a door. He was like a metal robot, standing vigil in protection of the Spirit Hall at its entrance. He was the spirit of this shelter. Han Sen dismounted Golden Growler as the Rex Spike in his hand began to spin. It spun faster and faster as Han Sen approached the spirit, until the flames became a controlled tornado affixed to his weapon. The spirit roared, and he brought his great axe down towards Han Sr. with both hands.
Young.
The flaming Rex Spike clobbered the great axe, shattering the blade in the process. The flaming Rex Spike did not stop there, though. It pierced through the armor of the spirit and drilled directly into his chest. Han Sen kept going, pushing the spirit into the Spirit Hall. Boom! The spirit was nailed to the statue, deader than dead could be. Han Sen did not even look at the spirit, and just casually climbed the disintegrating body that had been pinned to the statue. Using it for better grip, the spirit's body provided the elevation needed for Han Sen to effortlessly grab the spirit stone embedded in the statue's forehead. I, Steel Prince, am willing to submit and offer absolute loyalty to a new master. I will become a faithful servant from now until eternity. The steel giant respawned via the spirit stone and pledged his allegiance to Han Senator. He took off his steel helmet to reveal the face of a rugged man with long locks of black hair. Han Sen put the spirit stone against his forehead, and in the bright light, the spirit stone combined with the entity of the Steel Prince. Then, he went into Han Sen's Sea of Soul. Han Sen's audience had their mouths agape. From the beginning, when they assaulted the gate, until now, effortlessly reaching the Spirit Hall and its master to finalize the conquest. It all happened in less than an hour. It was pulled off without a hitch, at a blisteringly fast pace. The people who followed Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi looked upon Han Sen with great shock and were nearly traumatized by the repeated surprises Han Sen had been delivering. The only ones in greater shock were Qinjiang and his people. Get a fire going. It is time we feast. The royal shelter is ours. Brother Fist brought out the wine he had stashed on his beast mount. He raised it up and took a hearty swig. As the people warmed up, following their heart-stopping surprises, they began cheering in overwhelming joy. A lot of people had readied themselves to lose not only the lives of their friends, but their own lives as well. No one expected they would pull through without a single fatality, let alone a single scratch. Qin Jiang and Lu Tai watched the remainder of the creatures flee the shelter, in deep regret of their earlier decision. They did not expect Brother Fist to have found someone so strong, who could practically solo the entire conquest of a royal shelter. In deep regret, they wished they had accepted the new terms. If they had, they'd be inside reveling in the victory alongside them. But it was now too late for them to say anything, and they knew Brother Fist would not share the royal shelter with them. Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi insisted on providing Han Sen a share of the shelter's future income. After a contract was signed, the terms were for them to pay out a lump sum at the end of each year. Han Sen remained at the shelter for one night, but rejected Brother Fist and Fang Jingqi's request that he stay for longer. Upon leaving, he returned to the goddess shelter. Aside from Prince Steel, Han Sen had also managed to obtain the giant snake's beast soul. It was a sacred blood class metal-bone snake beast soul that took on the shape of a spear. It was a decent weapon. Of course, Han Sen had no use for sacred blood beast souls anymore, and so he decided on selling it, or at least trading it sometime down the line, if an alluring proposition or item caught his interest. Han Sen rode his golden growler across the ice field. In his hands, a blue metal bell rested. This was the Death Knell's beast soul, and it was a pet beast soul. When Han Sen held it in his hand, it looked like a toy bell. Seeing it there now, no one would ever comprehend what it must have been like to witness such a thing killing the blood centipede in the manner that it did. When Han Sen first got this pet, he wondered how he would feed it. He didn't think it could consume meat. After conquering the shelter, Han Sen tried to drip the blood of sacred blood creatures onto the bell. The results seemed a success, as the blood was absorbed by the bell, which soon after started to glow. That was when Han Sen realized the bell drank blood. But it didn't drink any old blood. It only seemed to react to blood from sacred blood creatures. Similar to the little angel, it was a picky eater. Han Sen wondered if, like with the little angel, sacred blood would not be enough to compel its evolution. He thought it would most likely require super creature blood to evolve into a battle mode pet. If this guy evolves into battle mode, could it be as scary as the original Death Knell? Han Sen's heart was hopeful at the thought. For Han Sen, felling super creatures was no longer an impossible feat therefore. Attempting to evolve the Death Knell through the method he theorized wouldn't be an all-too difficult task. On his return to the ice field, Han Sen ran into Wang Yuhang. Or rather, Wang Yuhang caught sight of Han Sen and then ran up to him. "Bossman, might you kindly sell me the life Geno essence?" Wang Yuhang asked, with a look of hope. The monster that guarded the blood spring was slain by Princess Yin Yang after Wang Yuhang drew it away. No body was left behind, only a life Geno essence. "Sure. You still haven't cashed in your 30% from before, and after the latest hunt, you are owed an additional 20%. It's yours, if you can cough up the other 50% of what it costs. But you must also keep the item a secret. You cannot tell anyone that you practically stole it from the Zhao family. If they were to learn we stole their super creature, I can't imagine they'd do anything kind to us," Han Sen said. "I understand. I will tell the tale that this life Geno essence belonged to a creature we both found and fought together. I will tell this to my family as well. Aside from you and I, nobody else can possibly know," Wang Yuhang said, with a voice coated in excitement. Han Sen rolled his eyes. Zero was present, and she was most certainly aware of which creature had dropped the life Geno essence. He seemed to have forgotten about her existence, but regardless, Han Sen believed he wouldn't admit the truth to anyone. His own hide would be on the line if he did. Not to mention his possession of a life Geno essence taken from the Zhao family would hurt his own family if the truth were ever revealed. That was not to suggest Han Sen was afraid of the Zhao family. Han Sen looked for Huangfu Pingqing for assistance and brought a map of the second god's sanctuary with him. The shelter was enormous, and even with the powers of the Ares Marshall Hall, it was difficult to compose such a map. There were a few 100,000 miles of uncharted regions, as well. Many known places were marked as danger zones, and lengthy journeys were only made longer due to the detours travelers had to make to avoid such treacherous places. These alternate routes often tripled the length of a journey, but unfortunately, there were many places that could not be avoided at all. The Ares Marshall Hall paid hefty prices of blood for the cartography of such areas. Few people returned from exploratory ventures of such places, and once mapped, no one ever dared return. When the cartographers spied the presence of a super spirit shelter, they would creep past them as best they could. They were wretchedly dangerous places for even elites to venture, and ordinary travelers and evolvers could never hope to traverse the danger-fraught terrain that encompassed super spirit shelters. Han Sen was more accomplished, of course, but even he would have to exercise caution when traveling across super spirit regions. At least with super creatures, there was every chance he could either kill or evade them. The closest danger zone to the ice field, where no one was advised to visit, was called the Black Desert. This place was unavoidable, and it had earned an association with certain death. The weather there was terrible, and it was populated with countless horrible monsters. The only way to avoid venturing through the Black Desert was a detour that would take 6 months to traverse. But even then, the alternate route would require the evasion of one spirit shelter. In many ways, this alternate route was more dangerous than the Black Desert itself. Han Sen was making preparations to travel across the Black Desert, as it would be too much trouble for him to take the detour. Cutting directly across would be much safer for him, and he wouldn't have too much trouble if there weren't any super spirits about. It would be a long time before he reached another human shelter, however. It was for this reason that he told Ji Yinran he would be absent for a long time. The presidential election was over, and Ji Ruozhen had become president of the alliance. Even Ji Yinran was now busy, following it. Han Sen spoke with her for some time, but she was too busy to talk for long. Messages constantly popped up, requiring her attention, and there was much paperwork to be done. Han Sen sat down with a cup of tea to watch Ji Yinran work. When he did this, he noticed he had never done it before. He had never sat down and simply watched her work. Although Ji Yinran was not very talented when it came to the arts of combat, that did not imply she wasn't talented at all. She was talented in many different aspects. In fact, Ji Yinran was quite remarkable. She was very good at handling things and was not far off having all the traits of a fantastic leader. Great fighting skills were the only thing she lacked. Watching her work busily, he thought having a future comprised solely of him drinking tea and watching her work would not be an ill fate. While Ji Yinran was working, she was attractive in a different way. She was not just a pretty woman or a lover that was weak and reliant on her man. She had a strong self-given, self-born momentum that drove her. Why are you watching me like that?
Ji Yinran inkred. Notisning Han Senes curious stare.
It's good to have you near me. Han Sen walked in front of Ji Yinran and gave her a deep kiss on her forehead. Ji Yinran's cheeks blushed, and she responded by asking, "What makes you say that, all of a sudden?" "It is merely because of how I feel. I feel this way, and so, I am inclined to say it." Han Sen pinched Ji Yinran's nose and then continued by saying, "How much more work? I have been tasked with the depletion of an inexhaustible well of work, it would seem. I have worked until midnight every night. If you are tired, you should return first," Ji Yinran said. "It's fine. You continue how you are. I will sit here in the meantime. I will return when I am tired." Han Sen reclined on the chair with his cup of tea and resumed his observation of her work. He was feeling quite relaxed. After a while, the red color in Ji Yinran's face had yet to subside. She chased Han Sen out and said, "I can't work when you look at me like that." Inside the Angel Gene Corporation office, a man sat behind a desk. His face was gloomy. Zhao Heng and Zhao Haiyang were standing in the room, silent. With heads lowered, they could not dare look at the man before them. The man behind the desk looked to be in his 40s. He was fairly unremarkable in appearance, but his body exuded an aura of terrible power. Every faint movement he made was intimidating. Even though Zhao Heng was of the same generation, with his grandson at his side, he almost didn't dare steal the air to breathe in that room. He was the chairman of Angel Gene, Zhao Seventh. It was a very old-fashioned name, derived from being the seventh child of the family. Zhao Seventh had many brothers because back when he was born, humans were encouraged to reproduce. It was common for families to have many children, and this most certainly applied to the Zhao family. The 6 brothers that came before Zhao Seventh were given much better names. But each of the 6 prior babies died during childbirth, and only Zhao Seventh had managed to survive. Back in that time, people were still superstitious, and the parents allowed a psychic to predict the life Zhao Seventh would lead. The prediction, however, stated Zhao Seventh would not survive the first 7 days of his life. These 7 days did not begin immediately following his own birth, but 7 days after his last brother died. Zhao Seventh would die 7 days from that day. The psychic foretold that the bad string of luck, which made the Zhao family's babies die, would end following the death of Zhao Seventh. If the mother was to make any more babies, they would live. 7 days after the 6th brother died, Zhao Seventh almost did die. Not wanting him to die, his mother did everything she could to protect him. She clutched Zhao Seventh in her arms and did not let go. A mother, who had 6 dead children, would not just sit idly by and watch her 7th baby die. On that day, his mother guarded him without rest. And something did indeed happen. The house collapsed, with the mother and son both inside. During the rescue operation, the mother was found crushed to death beneath the rubble. Zhao Seventh, however, was safe in the bosom of his mother's protection. She had died, but he had lived. He was fine, save for his mother's blood that soaked him. Upon his rescue, the baby was still licking his fingers and smiling jovially. And just like that, Zhao Seventh outlived his 7th day. Through his efforts, Angel Gene was built from the ground up, earning great renown for the Zhao family. It originally operated out of a small research facility, but it had since grown to become the Goliath entity it was on this day. Brother Seventh, I'm sorry. I messed it up. Zhao Heng was old, but in front of Zhao Seventh, he looked like a small, regretful child. His head was lowered and still, he did not dare look at the man. Everyone in the Zhao family was afraid of Zhao Seventh. They each spoke of how tough his life had been, and it was true. To develop Angel Gene into what it was, he had tread atop many corpses. The more a person of the Zhao family knew about his deeds, the greater they feared him. They knew better than anyone how scary he was. And it was because of how scary he was, they would each do everything he told them without question. Failure is nothing. It is mankind's habit to fail, and ill results are no stranger to any person. But those who do not recognize the mistakes that have led to their failure deserve a harsh response. Zhao Seventh looked at Zhao Heng coldly and continued, So tell me, what led to your failure? Zhao Heng, stuttering and tripping over his words, responded, I am sorry, but it was misfortune that led to our failure this time. We did not expect the hill of the spring to contain such a foul creature. And the boy, Han Sen, was not willing to use his super pet to stay the advance of the super creature. He also led it our way, and it was that action that led to the significant losses we incurred. Zhao Haiyang had not said a single word yet, but he chipped in to help Zhao Heng by saying, Han Sen tricked us. If he hadn't drawn the creature our way, we wouldn't have. Zhao Seventh looked at him coldly, and Zhao Haiyang swallowed the words he had yet to speak. It is my fault. Zhao Seventh looked at both of them when he said this. Calmly, he continued, It was my mistake for allowing you to tackle the foe without appropriate preparation. Leave now, but give Zhao Lian a shout. I need him. Zhao Heng and Zhao Haiyang breathed heavy sighs of relief. They left Zhao Seventh's office as if they had just dodged a death sentence. Not long after, a tall, middle-aged man knocked on the door of the office. He then entered. It was difficult for people to believe such a big and broad man, with a tanned face, had the name Zhao Lian. The name did not match the person, not by a long shot. Does the chairman have any requests? Zhao Lian politely asked. How are the Angel Gene fluid tests coming along? Zhao Seventh said, with a relaxed demeanor. Families always had at least one talented individual, and Zhao Lian was one of the younger family members he had taken a great liking to. Zhao Seventh gave him a lot of important tasks. We're still in the first stage of testing. Our results have highlighted the presence of a variety of issues and problems. Time is all they request, however. They'll get it fixed in due time, Zhao Lian answered. How many first-stage test vials were formulated? Zhao Seventh asked. There were 23 of them, Zhao Lian said. Give them to Zhao Long and his men, and have them kill Han Sen at his shelter. I don't care what it takes, Zhao Seventh coldly ordered. But the angel gene fluid is not yet stable. It has destructive results in the human body. If Zhao Long and his people use it, even if they succeed long enough to accomplish their task, they may not live very long afterwards. Zhao Lian sought to speak more, but what was cut off? The Zhao family has fed and cared for them, all for this day, Zhao Seventh said coldly. He continued by saying, it's time we attempt the 4th stage test. Observe Zhao Long and his people after they use the fluid. The data you will collect is imperative for the future success of the angel gene fluid. Yes. Zhao Lian did not say anything further. He took his leave and went directly to the 19th sub-basement laboratory. The lab was filled with many busy researchers. In the farthest reaches of the lab was a glass room. Inside it, a large man was chained to a Z-steel platinum bed. His forelimbs and torso were all securely locked down by the Z-steel chains, preventing movement. A mechanical arm hovered over the man and injected a red fluid into him. All over the man's body, his blood vessels began to swell immediately. His body looked like it was wreathed with scary, blood snakes. The man's eyes were red as he convulsed and struggled. He let out a spine-chilling shriek. Atop his head, one strange spike forced its way out. It was strange, as if it had suddenly grown out of his brain. Catcha! Catcha! The man easily shattered the Z-steel chains that tied him down. He stood up from the bed as all the muscles on his body swelled. His breathing was rough, and he slowly stepped towards the glass wall. With his red eyes, he stared at the researchers on the other side. 803, can you hear me? Zhao Lian picked up the microphone to speak into the sealed-up, transparent room. Yes. Although the man looked like a terrifying monster, he could still listen and answer. His voice was just a little bit shaky. The professor near him was extremely happy, and he proclaimed, another successful case. Our success rate has now hit 95%. Zhao Lian smiled at the professor and said, Professor, give me the rest of the angel gene fluid. Han Sen was in the midst of preparing for his journey. His road up to the Black Desert would most likely be free from trouble, but the difficulties would begin after he entered that land. He would have to cross that perilous region before he reached another human shelter where he could restock his provisions. According to the Ares Marshall Hall's predictions, should nothing too awry present itself, it would take Han Sen a month to cross the Black Desert. If troubles did arise, no one knew whether or not he would emerge from that place ever again. Huangfu Pingqing advised Han Sen not to go, saying that his mother was in a big human shelter and that there was no danger there. Even if Han Sen wanted to give her something, he could have sent it via delivery. He didn't have to go in person. But Han Sen knew that what he wanted to give his mother was not something he could easily trade. That was why he wanted to go there and visit her himself. Don't worry, I have a super pet. I will be fine. Han Sen smiled at Huangfu Pingqing while talking with her on the communicator. Huangfu Pingqing merely sighed in response and said, Do not underestimate that place. Our people have only traveled there once. A team comprised of 100 people were sent in, yet only 2 made it out half alive. Those who made it out weren't even sure how they did so. Their account detailed an encounter with a black dragon in the Black Desert. But another monster swallowed the black dragon up, and it looked like a phoenix. They spoke of mountains that moved, pits in the sands that consumed creatures, and worse. That place is far too dangerous for anyone to venture alone. How can dragons and phoenix exist in this world? This is not mythology. They are merely creatures. These beasts you speak of are most likely super creatures, at worst. And it's not like I haven't killed a super creature before.
Han Sen smilade again.
I know my attempts at swaying your resolve to go there are futile, but still, I would like you to think about it and perhaps reconsider, Huangfu Pingqing said. Senior, when I make it to the other side, await my report. I'll make sure to contact you and let you know of my success in making it through.
Again, Han Sen smilade.
Okay, if you're that determined, how about you transport some beast souls on my behalf? Huangfu Pingqing asked, with a wry smile. After his preparations were complete, Han Sen brought along the silver fox and left the goddess' shelter. He traveled in the direction of the Devil's Mountain, and once over, he planned to veer away and head towards the Black Desert. But after arriving at the trail leading up and over the Devil's Mountain, he frowned. Immediately, he did not feel safe. I have walked this trail many times. There shouldn't be a threat, and I'm not Wang Yuhang, so I can't be unlucky enough to have misfortune befall me. Despite Han Sen thinking this, he opened up his Dongxian Sutra to scan the surrounding environment for life forces. He wanted to see if there were any powerful creatures in the vicinity. In the next second, Han Sen's face changed. He sensed the presence of many powerful creatures all about. He could sense the force of these creatures, but he could not tell what they were. Still, just sensing such life forces was enough to make Han Sen almost panic. The energies he sensed were greater than sacred blood creatures, but not quite in the realm of super creatures. Han Sen was more than surprised, because he had never sensed something like this before. Each of the energy life forces were different, but when he looked deeper, the forces seemed comparable to his own strength. The fitness of whatever awaited him had to be at least 200. But this was a strange number. Sacred blood creatures don't reach such levels, and super creatures were never so low. Even the silver fox had a stronger energy reading. There were more than 20 of these life forces, as well. Things were taking a strange turn. What is this? Han Sen continued to scan his vicinity, and he noticed that the presences were approaching him quickly. Then, he saw some people appear before him from a nearby forest. When Han Sen saw these people emerge, he could not help but shout, "Shura! How is this possible?" Han Sen saw that each person had a horn protruding from their head, the sign of a male Shura. But Shura were unable to exist in this place, as they could not use beast souls. But as clear as day, Han Sen could see them clad in beast soul armor, wielding beast soul weaponry. What is this? What's going on? Why are there Shura here, in the shelter? Did the Shura figure out how to survive here in this world? Han Sen was shocked. If what he was seeing was true, then humanity was assuredly doomed. Quickly, however, Han Sen realized something was wrong. Although they had horns, similar to the Shura, their colors were off. The horns of a Shura could be black, white, gold, and purple. There were no red horns, which was what he was seeing now. Yet, the horns of those he was observing now were clearly not decorations, or some strange accessory or apparatus. They protruded from the bones of their skulls just like the ones belonging to the Shura did. If they were humans, they must have consumed super geno points. Otherwise, their energy would not be as strong as it was. They were much stronger than humans. Whoosh! One of the blood-horned Shuras let loose an arrow from a beast soul bow. The arrow flew directly towards Han Sen with frightening power. It cracked the air in two and approached him quickly.
Young.
The Adorate appeared in front of Han Sen and broke the beast soul arrow. But this did not appease or make Han Sen any happier. If anything, it made him look glummer than ever. The power of the arrow was almost as strong as what Han Sen himself could achieve. "Who are you people?" Han Sen called out, eager to know whether or not they were Shura. "We are the ones who have come to kill you," the man who fired an arrow coldly responded. He gestured with his hand, and he and his 22 blood-horned compatriots charged towards Han Sen. On the other side of the peak, Zhao Lian was holding up a pair of binoculars. He was watching every little move with keen interest, and he recorded the results. First stage, Angel Gene Fluid versus a Super Pet. Let's see what happens. Zhao Lian looked excited, and he was eager to find out what was going to happen. But Zhao Lian knew that these evolvers, despite having a fitness level of over 100 and having consumed the Angel Gene Fluid, would still not have what it took to take down a super creature. Their primary target was Han Sen, after all. But no matter how strong the super pet was, there was only one of it. It would not be able to protect Han Sen when he was surrounded. It is a shame, though. It is a shame that I must sacrifice Zhao Long and all his people on the account of cutting down that Han Senator. We should have loosed these warriors against a super creature. Zhao Lian felt sorry because the beast soul would disappear into the empty upon Han Sen's death, and Zhao Long would not be able to test his mettle against the super pet. The people who had consumed the Angel Gene Fluid were dead men walking, too. They could serve no purpose in the future.
Young.
The Adiraid swung her sword as Zhao Long and his people approached with firm haste. In a formation, they looked set to deal with the attack. The Adiraid was a really powerful, oppressive force, but killing them in a short amount of time would be difficult. 8 of the people with bloodhorns surrounded Han Sen.